I'm going to call the meeting of the Board of Public Works to order on October 25th, 2018. Would Diane please call the roll?
Mayor Donches?
Here.
Commissioner Ackerman?
Here.
Commissioner Pappas?
Here.
Commissioner Moriarty?
Here.
Commissioner Ortiz?
Present.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
I'll move to approve the agenda as amended.
Discussion? All those, but while we're on the agenda, we did talk about moving up the issue of the fence
Yes.
at 1 Hutchinson Street to the, either during public comment or immediately thereafter.
Yes, so moved. I would move to switch that to under public comment. That's usually where we handle citizen concerns, and so they don't have to sit here through all the presentations.
All those in favor of that motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. So we will insert it after public comment. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting?
So moved.
Discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. What?
Did anyone leave a note on the door? I wonder if Ernie may not have realized upstairs. Because if you don't always notice that,
Yes.
we're kind of used to it. Thanks.
There's another meeting up there, so.
The 7th. Sorry.
All right, public comment. We're going to take the Hutchinson Street sign issue, or fence, excuse me, issue next. But is there a public comment with respect to any other item that is coming before the board or anything else? Yes.
I just want to make a quick comment about the work over here that they're going to do a presentation on.
Yes.
Because this is for the Department of Public Works.
Yes.
I've been involved in those meetings.
No, wait.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Peter Schaefer.
Yeah.
I live at 15 East Street.
Okay. And can he be heard on the tape?
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I just want to speak really quickly.
Now,
Okay.
I apologize for interrupting.
I'll live right here.
we want to recognize Alderman Ernie Jetty, the liaison, who's also present. So please, go ahead.
I was in the committee when this plan was come up in this particular version was being recommended. The only comment I wanted to make was, as a resident, I live right here, is that I wanted to point out that this road over here has really been pretty bad in the last few years, and I've gone to the Department of Public Works several times over that, and they explained to me that there are cobblestones underneath this part of the road, and some of them have been missing because they've been digging up the road and been redoing it over the years. So over time they shift. So no matter what you do, this seems to be always open up this road. So I know the Department of Public Works has been sort of dealing with that, figuring out what to do. And I also know that this project is going to be doing something. I simply want to make sure that the Department of Public Works and this project gets together to make that work, because they have an estimate of what it takes to do that. And the Department of Public Works has a better understanding of what's underneath the road. So I just want to make sure that both of these groups meet together and have it work right when it gets done next year. Thank you.
Well, thank you very
Thank
much. Anybody else want to make any public comment? If not, we will go to item A under engineering, the issue of allowing a fence located in the right-of-way at 1 Hutchinson Street to remain in its current location. I think there was a request, so why don't we hear from the requesters first?
Good afternoon. My name is Louis Fish, and this is.
I'm Allison Hearn.
We reside at 1 Hutchinson Street. If it's okay, we've sort of prepared a statement regarding. It may take about 5 minutes to read.
That's fine.
If that's okay.
That's fine.
So we're here to talk about the house that we purchased on 1 Hutchinson Street back in 2015. When we purchased the house, there was a stigma around it, having been the house that was associated with a murder-suicide here in Nashua several years back. The house had been vacant for some time before we bought it, and when we bought it, it needed a lot of updates both in and out. So we've taken the last 3 years to do a lot of those updates inside. But the biggest update that we had to do, the biggest renovation project that we had to do was on the outside as the property had been overgrown and unkempt for several years. And our neighbors can certainly attest to that. During the first year of our cleanup of the property, we actually focused on the front area of the house facing Hutchinson Street, which was to clear out lots of overgrown bushes and shrubs and replace the garage door, put in garden beds, all that stuff. And since last year, we focused on what was perhaps the bigger concern, which was the side yard and the backyard that faced Huey Street. So in the past year, we've hired Herco Tree Service, which removed about 15 trees from that back area of the property. Some because they were too large, some were unhealthy, and many of those trees and shrubs were actually overhanging our neighbor's house, so we removed those out of courtesy to them. But a lot of the shrubs and trees also were along Huey Street, many of which was actually impeding into Huey Street. So we took the initiative to remove all that, remove all the brush. We had P&L Landscaping then follow up and grade the property all along Huey Street and along our neighbors' fence lines. After which time we consulted Gate City Fence, who put up the fence, which is a combination of a privacy fence and a picket fence along the side of our house facing Huey Street. Then P&L Landscaping came in after that and did more landscaping, not the least of which was to put in gravel areas for parking our boat, raised garden beds in the back. We hydroseeded, put shrubs, ornamental trees. We've done a great amount of work to this property, and that project has actually cost, in excess of $20,000. So it's not a small project that we've been doing. So besides beautifying the property, we are actually also focused on the goal of helping to clean up the brush and trees that impeded on Huey Street. And when the project actually began, from the corner of Hutchinson and Huey Street, it was impossible to see our neighbor's house at 9 Huey Street, let alone see their driveway. That was just not possible.
And if I could just interject, you'll actually see that there are a couple of photos in there that we pulled straight from Google Maps. Those photos were from 2011, and between 2011 and 2018, when we did the tree and brush removal, that had just grown and was even worse than you're seeing in those Google Map photos. And then we have a subsequent photo where you can see the fence line as it stands now, and that the visibility is in fact much better. Sorry, didn't mean to cut in there.
No. So to that end, now if you go down that section, there is no longer a vision issue coming around Hutchinson onto Huey Street. We've actually cleared that up and made it particularly better than it was, at great expense to ourselves. And in short, we're basically asking the city to allow us to keep the fence in its current location, because we've actually cleared up that safety issue that had been brought up to us after the fence was installed. We spoke to Steve Dukran from the city engineer's office, and explained to him that we had cleaned that up and made the property better. He actually referenced that he thought that it would be an issue with the plows where the fence was located, to which we responded the problem actually had been much, much worse prior to our cleanup of the property, that if there was a problem with safety or with the plows, that was the time to correct it, and we've actually gone through and done that ourselves.
On behalf of the city.
So, as far as the preparation for the work that we did, we actually went to the city's website, consulted the site, and tried to determine what would be required for us to put in a fence. And the city's website at the time had indicated that no building permit was required. We actually included in the email, which we can pass out, I'm sorry, I'm not quite prepared for that. Here are some packets that we prepared regarding this.
Sorry, we're nervous.
No,
We're just gonna be
you're
candid
doing
about
great.
it.
You're doing great.
Tough one. So, we had actually consulted the city's websites, and in a couple locations, it simply stated that there was no building permit required. And the city engineer, after we had been notified that we were on the city's right of way, indicated that there may not be a building permit required, but there is a land and use permit, as well as a consultation with the city engineer's office that they would have to have a surveyor come out to our property, none of which was recognized on the city's website. So we in part went by the city's website to get our information as to what would be required. Now, we've since gone on to the website and noticed that as of October 4th of this year, that the site is now under construction to fix those shortfalls, where the site had been misleading to lead people to believe that there were no other requirements other than that there wasn't a building permit required. So in addition to consulting the city's website, we actually received estimates from 3 reputable fence companies in the area, Gate City Fence, On the Fence in Merrimack, as well as Granite State Fence in Londonderry, all of which who had good reputations, but we ultimately went with Gate City because of their excellent record and their affiliation with the city. Everybody told us that they were the best of the best. And they and the other fence companies told us that the standard was 5 feet away from the road would be permissible, and that there weren't any other regulations that they were aware of. So, in addition to all those steps, during our tree removal, the landscaping, and even up to the date of the fence installation, we consulted our neighbor that's on 9 Huey Street to make sure that they were on board, and they were 100% on board with the cleanup project that we were doing. As of the date that the fence installation began, we actually met with our neighbor and Gate City Fence and stood in their driveway and said, this is where the fence will start. This is where your site will start. To which they responded that it would actually be, no matter where the fence was located, it would be better than the city.
No, sorry,
Excuse me,
sorry.
it would be.
She said it was no different than before when there were trees and shrubs obstructing their view, for her words.
So she indicated, and we actually asked her, is this location okay? And she said, yeah, it's fine. So, and of course, in addition to that, we did tour the town to find out where fences were located, to try to get an idea, is this a proper location for our fence? So we did as much due diligence as we possibly could to locate the fence and consulted with reputable people. Now, during my conversation with Mr. Dukran, I learned that the city engineer's office wasn't aware that there was an ordinance around the location of fences until less than a year ago. And because of that ordinance that he found, they've recognized that there's a problem with those locations of fences in the city, and that they were going to start being diligent regarding fence locations and things like that, addressing those. Now, I submit that the city is in part culpable for where we positioned that, because the expectation wasn't set properly on the city's website. So if Mr. Dukran would like to start enforcing the locations of those fences, I think it needs to start with the website and proper notification to the city's residents where those should be. Once that notification is put into place, if nothing else, some sort of note on the website to alert the residents that they need to consult the city prior to installation. At that point, once they start doing that, then you can hold residents responsible, in our opinion. So again, in summary, we did follow the city's website, professionals in the industry, and general observation when preparing for the fence installation and the subsequent landscaping projects. Now, the ramifications to us if the city allows the fence to stay in, the ramifications if the city allows the fence to stay in its current location is that, A, the cleanup has already been done of the location, making it much safer than it was before. Our neighbor has requested that a blind driveway sign be put in because they feel that the fence has blocked their vision. And, you know, we don't object to a sign being put up.
We don't think it's warranted, but we do not object to it.
Right. And that the city, you know, the ramifications, again, would be that the city modify the language on the website. And I think that we've already demonstrated by cleaning up the property and moving everything back away from the street that there isn't now any issue with regarding snow plowing and such. But if the city decides not to uphold our request to keep the fence where it is, the ramifications to us is that it's going to cause significant financial hardship, not the least of which would be to move the fence, to undo thousands of dollars in landscaping and everything that has been contingent on the location of the fence, the cost of the materials that we would be out, both in the fencing that would be removed, as well as all of the landscaping, which was, you know, a significant expense to us. You know, that the landscaping alone around the fence is, in addition, is in excess of $6,000 just in landscaping, as well as the logistical hardship that it would cause, because moving the fence actually changes the entire plan of our backyard, which includes right now that we've planned a shed that we've put on hold pending this decision. So, you know, so what we're proposing is that the if the city feels it's warranted to put in the sign, that we feel that we've already addressed the safety concern. The city is already working on the website, which we think is fantastic. But in addition, I think that if the city is going to hold its residents accountable for the location of the fence, I think once that website is updated, from that point forward, if they choose to do that, I think that it's, you know, it's completely within their power to do so. I think that in this particular situation, I think I would like, and we would hope that our situation would be grandfathered.
We're sorry that was longer than 5 minutes.
All right.
Sorry.
Well, of course, the fact that you've submitted this request and the neighbors had complained has generated quite a bit of discussion about this whole issue. The city attorney is here to address this, but it may be that it's the zoning law which requires where a fence be located when you're on adjacent to a street, and this board may not even have authority to waive a zoning law. But as it pertains to the city website, I mean, I get the point you're making, because this is, you know, not that easy to track all this stuff or figure all this stuff out. But it does say that, and I'm just looking at it for the first time right now, right? When do I need a building permit? And it says you do not need building permits for fences over 6 feet high. Now, but that doesn't really say where you can build it. It also says you don't need a building permit for water tanks if the capacity does not exceed 5,000 gallons. Now, could you take from that you could build a 5,000-gallon water tank right on this edge of the road? Or it says that you don't need a building permit to build a swimming pool, a prefabricated swimming pool less than 24 inches deep. But I don't think you would think from that you could do it right on the road. You would.
No, of course not, and that's.
Well, it's in the same list, that's all I'm saying.
And that's why we actually consulted with, you know, several reputable fence companies.
How could this fence company
and-
not know about this? But
Well,
anyway.
we actually have included in the packet a letter from the fence company.
Yeah, well.
Which they had said, well, the problem that I have with that statement, Mr. Mayor, is that the city engineer's office themselves have admitted that they didn't know about
Until
the
recently.
regulations.
Was the city engineer here? I don't.
It's Steve
Maybe
Dugan.
a record. Can we just close up? So, the fact is, we've always been aware that you can't put anything within the right-of-way without this board actually approving it. And we brought some things before you, before, and it's a use agreement, you must remember that. It's just a handful of items. So that law has always been in place. What we weren't aware of, that there was a specific ordinance regarding if an owner wanted to put a fence along the city's roadway or right-of-way, that they would have to consult the engineer's office so that they can get a determination of where the right-of-way is. We weren't aware of that until, as Mr. Fish mentioned, less than a year ago.
All right, well, why don't we hear from the city attorney, and maybe that will set the stage for any further comments or questions.
Well, actually, I think the city engineer was gonna get to addressing the safety issue, if there is or isn't one. Maybe you wanna do
Yeah,
that.
I might as well mention that. And the reason why we don't allow items in the right-of-way without permission is because of side distance issues. If it's too close to the edge of the roadway, it can be struck by the plows or by another vehicle. And we have had instances where homeowners will come to the city, hey, you gotta pay for my fence, but the fence shouldn't have been there in the first place. And so,
Well,
So-
if I may, regarding that issue of the plows, you know, has already been, you know, one of our neighbors is actually here to talk about that several years before we even owned the house, that there was a call made to the city that area needed to be cleaned up, that it was already a problem. We actually fixed that issue for the city, and now that we find out that that was the city's right of way, we actually have done that in a sense for the city that should have cleaned it up several years ago.
And to speak to your comment, Mr. Mayor, you know, I understand by reading the website that, you know, it lists those several things. However, we do feel that we did due diligence. We did go to reputable companies. They all parroted the same thing back to us, 5 feet from the road. And as Lou has said, we did go around and we checked to make sure that's consistent. And within a 2-mile radius, we found at least 30 instances where fences are 5 feet or closer to the road. And so there is no reason for us to question what we were being told by the professionals
Well, I'm
within the
not
industry.
saying that you should have discovered this, really. I'm saying that this fence company should know better. Can you give us instances? Can you give us, if we hold this thing, well, there's first the question, do we have authority? And I guess we're gonna hear from the city attorney, but if it is a zoning law, then the ZBA can grant a variance. But why don't we hear from him and,
Yeah. I went and looked at this yesterday afternoon, just so I would understand where the fence is. It is not so close to the intersection that it impacts the zoning ordinance, which has some requirements if the fence is at the intersection. So that's not involved.
so the zoning ordinance is not involved?
Right.
Okay.
What is involved, however, is this board has the authority to allow encumbrances in the right-of-way, but only if they're safe. And so you should consider, this board should consider, if this creates a safety issue. It does impede the view from the neighbor's driveway. I don't think there's any question about that. Now, maybe, and I've got no reason to doubt, that there were trees and shrubs and who knows what that previously also impaired the view. But at least this board didn't affirmatively allow that to happen and grant permission for that to happen. And why that's important is generally the city is not going to be held liable if an automobile collision happens on a street. But there are exceptions. And one of the exceptions is if the people who have the authority are grossly negligent or exercise bad faith in permitting the deficiency in the roadway to occur. And that would include site views and lines and so forth. And to make it even worse, for those of you on the board, you're indemnified when you act in good faith and within the scope of your authority. But you don't have authority to allow an unsafe condition to exist. So personal liability can become an issue if you do allow an unsafe condition to exist. And while I understand this works a hardship on Mr. Fish and Ms. Hurd, given what they've gone through, it's not really a question of whether a building permit was required or not required. I think it's not a real stretch to say people should know not to put a fence in the right-of-way. And Gate City Fence and the other fence companies, to the extent they were consulted, gave you wrong information. So you may have some bone to pick with them. But Gate City Fence, who's been doing business in this city for God knows how long, really should know that you can't put the fence in the right-of-way. And the right-of-way may not be 5 feet from the edge of pavement. In order to determine where that right-of-way is, one can hire a surveyor, or one could start with the simple expedient of going to the city engineer's office and see what plans are already available that delineate the right-of-way. And I really think that's what should have happened here. But I really can't recommend that this board allow an unsafe condition to exist, given the state of the law.
Commissioner Pappas.
A couple of things. That was one of the first questions I had, does this board have authority over this? Because I've actually been involved in intersections like this where there had been overgrown grass, even though it's really a code issue. People don't want to call their alderman, or their aldermen don't respond. They have called me. And in looking at these pictures, I think that this overgrowth is far worse than the sight vision that the fence creates. And I did do a drive-by. And it's one of those decisions I think I'm going to make my mind up last minute, because I really think that if we have one person take a fence down, then we have every person take a fence down. And that's not something that this board has control over. That's code enforcement. And I can tell you that I heard from several people in intersections that the overgrowth was even worse than this. And code enforcement did absolutely nothing, and people are still taking their lives in their hands as they come out of this intersection. So, you know, talk about bad, you know, I just, I think that the fence is less of an obstruction than the greenery. And again,
Is the greenery still there, or the greenery was there before?
I'm sorry, the greenery was there before. And I can tell you, in other intersections where we really, and the city doesn't enforce it, it's code enforcement, it's not this board, because this board does not have authority over that. I will tell you, you're gonna lose that fence. The plow, it's you know, I mean, I don't know if we can reach some kind of an agreement where we say when the fence falls down that you take it back a couple of feet. And I didn't know how much this encroaches on the right-of-way. That was my other question. I don't know who has that. You know how many feet this fence encroaches on the right-of-way?
Probably 5 or 6 feet.
It encroaches 5 or 6 feet, okay. Because I don't know if we can make some sort of an agreement where when the fence falls over, that it kind of has to come out of the right-of-way. Because I will tell you that this fence, having a fence in a strip, and it's just between two driveways where both my neighbor and I, that's the only place where we can deposit snow. I cannot tell you how often we've had to replace the fence. We just split the cost. But that's with just regular snow blowing and regular shoveling. So I will tell you that with the plows, that it's not gonna last. I don't know if it's worth the fight for you. But I can tell you it's not gonna last for 5 years, that's my guess. I mean, I don't know for other people in the room who've done plowing, but I just don't think this fence will last that long anyway. But
I mean, we did see a fence that is in the neighborhood behind the Rite Aid on Amherst Street. It is almost exactly the same setup as ours as far as where the driveways are located, where the fence is located. It's a stockade fence, and that fence.
Corner lot.
Yeah, on a corner lot, and it has
Where
that
is
long
this one?
strip. It's
On
on
Mead
I
Street.
believe it's on Mead Street.
Mead and
And-
what? Mead and,
Mead Street,
Yeah, it was
in
listed in
Nashua,
what's the cross street, you know?
it was
I know it's
listed in
behind
the.
Rite Aid.
Is that on Charlotte?
Charlotte, yeah.
Court.
And
Yeah.
that fence has
Yeah.
been there a while. It doesn't look like it's had replaced panels or anything, and I don't doubt that it will incur damage over time. It's a fence that happens. I've actually kind of dinged a couple of spots myself. You know, I think at this juncture, we're willing to sort of take our chances with that, based on the amount of money that we would have to spend if that panel needed to be moved back, 6 feet or whatever it is. As Lou had mentioned, it's not just a matter of, even if Gate City said, we'll come in, we'll do it for free, we're looking at probably another like $6,000 to $10,000 to reconfigure the landscape, and just the loss of trees that we've put in and shrubs that we've put in, that sort of stuff. We have to rebuy certain supplies. And I also did want to just mention Cindy Belness here. She's one of our neighbors. She is the one that called originally regarding the hazard before we put the fence in several years ago. So
And I was before, is it okay if I give
Yes.
some input? So those of you that don't know me, I'm Sandy Belknap. I live at 40 Fairmount Street, which is the cross-section of Hutchinson and Fairmount. So I'm 2 houses down from their house on the Hutchinson Street side. And I lead the crime watch in our neighborhood for the last 10 years. I'm very involved with Mohawk Tannery cleanup and redevelopment for 20 years, and I sat on the planning board from 2009 to 2012. I only come to these meetings when I think it's really important to speak up on behalf of fellow citizens. I had called the city code enforcement, Kyle Metcalf, back in 2011 timeframe. I don't have the exact date. I talked to him a lot over a period of 2010 to 2012 because there were a lot of issues in our neighborhood. And as the Neighborhood Crime Watch, people think I'm kind of like the mother of the neighborhood and they call me for everything. So we've trained people that if they don't call themselves, I'm not following up. And that is better now in 2018. But at that time, I called because I didn't drive my car. Now this is a secondary side road, so that intersection is not a heavily traveled street. But when I would walk, there were oak trees, and I would have to walk in the wintertime in the middle of the street because there was so much trees and shrub hanging over that you would have oak tree saplings hitting you in the face. So when they did this and cleaned everything up as a neighbor, it's like, wow, this is incredible. I might even get another dog now so I can walk in the wintertime and go down that street. I kind of exaggerate a little bit there, but it is a huge difference. And if there is, what is it called, a blind driveway, there's a second blind driveway on that same property that's not paved. So that's another concern, and and if that's going to be an issue, they need to probably address how they want to handle that in that on that area. So I know Lou and Allie talked a lot to those neighbors. Our neighborhoods went through a lot during that time period when the former neighbors left. It was a disaster. If anybody drove up or saw the pictures, it was all boarded up. It was a really bad situation. We have really good neighbors here, and I would hate to see them, after everything they've done to bring that property back up to something that really enhances our neighborhood. We have a nice neighborhood. So I hope that the board would take that into consideration. I think it's 3 years now that you've been there, because I posted on Facebook 3 years ago this week that I'm so excited we have new neighbors that are going to carry on what's happening here. So, I'm a little emotional about it just because there is so much emotion with this house. But you can see, I drove around last night at night, at 9 o'clock at night when I was coming home from another meeting with Nashua Listens. And as I drove through, I went back around a couple of times to see, and it's so much better now. You can see if a walker's coming by, they can jump out of the street if a car's coming, because now there's several feet between the fence and the street. Before you couldn't do that. It was all rose bushes, tree limbs. So I could go on and on, but I think you get my point, if anybody has any questions. But I wish I had the exact day that I had called code enforcement. And, you know, Kyle Metcalf knows that I call on a regular basis, only for important things. And he said it's the property owner's responsibility. As you can imagine, what ended up happening at that house, there was issues with that property, and they didn't want to do a thing. We have people here that did that.
Commissioner Tees.
First, I want to say, Lou and Allison, thanks for coming tonight. You did a great job presenting your case and well documented. We appreciate that. And there's no doubt about it, you did a great job cleaning up that home and invested a lot of time, love, and energy. And I don't doubt that there are other instances. You mentioned Mead Street. I can drive by there on the way home and check it out. And I generally like to think that I make decisions based on common sense, and if that were, if it was common sense alone, I'd say absolutely, I'd support you 110%. In fact, I came here tonight thinking, yeah, no doubt. But I'm not the smartest guy in the world, and I always listen to opinions of people that generally have Esquire after their name. And I heard something tonight that concerns me. And I'm really unclear if we even have the authority to grant this, but knowingly voting to approve something, knowing that it could cause liability to us individually or to the city, I'd have a tough time voting for it. So that's kind of my thoughts at the moment. But again, I'm unclear if we even have the authority to vote.
Commissioner Moriarty.
Yeah, question on right away. Are we saying that the fence is on city property 5 feet? Is that what you're in fact saying?
Yes, about.
Well, right of way is, it's not, there's an easement, you know, it's owned by the homeowner, but there's an easement. The city has the right to use it to the extent that it wants to.
Oh, so they are on their property. The fence is on your property. That was the
But
question.
the city has an easement, the so-called right of way. It is astounding to me that a fence company wouldn't, or would pretend, or whatever, I don't know what this is, they don't know that they're not supposed to build fences in the city right of way? Oh, really? But,
I don't
guess-
think they believed that it was so far back. I think that is a concern, that they
Right.
just did not realize it was so
Yeah,
far
but
back
shouldn't
on
they
our
check?
particular property.
I mean, maybe if I ask this and you think it's none of my business, just say so, but how much did this fence cost?
The fence alone was $11,000.
So they have $11,000 job and they don't check to see what the right of way is? Don't they?
I mean, if you take all the amounts that we put into this,
Yeah.
$11,000 for the fence, you know, $6,000 to $7,000 in landscaping, $5,000 for the tree removal.
Shrub removal. Plants, another $2,000.
I mean, it's not a stretch to say that this particular project has cost about $25,000.
Yeah. Is there anyone who would like to go see this? Commissioner Moriarty?
Actually, I did go by there today, actually, and they've done a beautiful job on your property, very nice. But I also agree with the attorney that there's no doubt that it is a blocking the driveway of the adjacent house. So I think the fence is probably 6 feet high. It looked I didn't get out of my car, but it looked 6 feet.
It's a 6-foot fence.
Right, so it's.
And the driveway, because of the way that the properties were allowed to exist previously, their property and their driveway is exactly on our property line. There is no footage between their driveway and our property line. So along their driveway, we actually pulled the fence in several feet to give them room to be able to open their car doors, things like that, as well as bring it in 5 to 6 feet from the road, and demonstrated all that to them, you know, well before we even put in the fence, but we actually did it again on the day that we installed the fence. But what was there before, the trees and the brush and everything, between that and where the fence is now, it actually is a difference of about 12 feet that we actually gave them vision, because we're 5 to 6 feet away from the road, but all that brush and stuff existed 5 to 6 feet more into the road before they had visibility. So we actually granted them about an extra dozen feet of visibility that they didn't have before this project.
And to be clear, just so you're aware, when we say that we consulted them, Tim from Gate City Fence was actually physically there mapping out where the fence location would be with the string. When the neighbor showed up, we called her over, mapped it out, said to her, like, this is where it would end. Do you want us to try to bring it in a couple of feet? Anything like that. And she stood there and said, nope, it's fine. It's no different than before when all the trees and brush were there obstructing their view. So we said, okay, then we're going to move forward. In matter of fact, Lou got in her driveway and said, so that means if you're in your car, you're backing up, and she's like, yeah, that's fine. She's like, it's absolutely fine. So had we known that they felt that it was going to obstruct their view, again, we do not believe that it truly does. But had they said something at that time, we absolutely would have pulled it back a couple more feet. We're nice neighbors. We really are. We try to be good citizens and respectful, and we would have done it right then and there. We were very, very surprised when she came up to us afterwards, considering we had consulted them through every step of the process, including the day of installation.
Commissioner Pappas.
This is very difficult, but I did drive by, and it was one of those decisions that I'm gonna, like, make my mind up the last minute. But I just see the shrubbery, and I really kind of, I feel like we have a law that you're not supposed to dig in a road within 5 years, and almost very often this board says, all right, you know what, we'll give someone a hardship. And if we were going through the whole city, and again, this wouldn't be necessarily us, because part of the problem is that I think that code enforcement is kind of involved in the picture here. But I will tell you, someone who had been afraid to pull out on their street, and this was probably 5 years ago, their neighbors still haven't had to put the brush back. I know of someone who reported an illegal apartment, nobody pulled permits. The answer from code was, we don't go in guns blazing. So part of my upset is that now we're kind of getting stuck cleaning this mess up that's not really, this was a mess, and the new fence is not a mess. And I think it's really unfair to say we really don't enforce that when it's a tree, and then when it's a fence, to ask someone who has spent that much on really probably what a lot of people would have called an ugly house is really unfair to the neighbors, and I can't, in good conscience, deny this variance. Because I think that if the city was going to get sued, let them get sued over all the overgrown brush that code enforcement doesn't enforce through the city. I mean, an illegal apartment doesn't hurt anyone, but I think the overgrown brush is a real issue. And I think that this property looks much cleaner. And I did do a drive-by, and I am someone who is a bit of a nervous Nelly driver. And that said, I have a van, so mine's probably a little bit higher up than I didn't drive in a sedan. But I can't in good conscience ask these people to flush this money down the toilet.
Commissioner Moriarty.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry to say, I still maintain that it is a safety issue when it's all said and done, and I'm very sorry for all the time and energy. And I would not be opposed if you wanted to postpone this till next month so the other members can inspect the property. I mean,
We both
did,
yeah.
but it's important to see, so
It is.
more so than the pictures, I think.
I guess I would like to see it. There's a difference between, though, a fence and a brush, because brush isn't like a permanent structure. I mean, it can be
Right.
removed in any
But
point.
they never
Mayor,
required to
if
remove
you
it.
will, it wasn't just brush, it was actual trees that were there.
Yeah.
From the street, you
Still
could
they're
not
not
even
permanent.
see that house.
You didn't know the house
It
was
was-
there, that there was a driveway, a house, nothing.
They couldn't see anything.
I mean, I do understand that. I would like to see it. You know, I didn't know that there would be quite this much. I didn't really know what we'd be looking at. So I guess I would like to see it. So, Commissioner Ackerman.
No, I agree. I think Commissioner Tease mentioned it because I sat here prior to the meeting, well-prepared, well-informed with what I had. I didn't have the city's perspective. So now I'm a little concerned that if I'm creating a safety situation, I might not necessarily vote in favor of this. But I guess I have a question is, based on this, I would recommend the city implement a building permit for every fence that goes up in the city, so we avoid this going forward. Cut and dry.
It's not a bad idea.
But I also think, and I would defer to.
Or at least maybe one along a street. I mean, if it's in someone's backyard, you know, what's the difference? Anyway,
Well,
I don't know, that's something to think about.
I also think is this really not a zoning issue? Because if somebody was building a structure and they encroached upon the distance between where they're gonna put a garage and somebody's property line, wouldn't that need to go through the zoning?
So why is this not a zoning issue?
Well, you have setbacks, but the setbacks don't apply to fences. You can put a fence right on your property line.
Right.
Right? So you can put a fence right on the right-of-way line, except within 20 feet of an intersection. And here,
Oh, I see.
the fence is in the backyard, but it doesn't come all the way up to actually the intersection of Hutchinson and Dewey Streets. The zoning does provide protection in what they call the safety triangle at
And is this in the safety
intersection.
triangle?
This is not in the safety triangle. It starts somewhat further back along Dewey Street and goes very close to the neighbor's driveway. Apparently not all the way to the property line, but through the neighbor's driveway.
So,
Commissioner Ackerman.
thank you. A lot of good information that you have there, but that information's not out on our website clearly defined, somebody that's gonna put up a fence or a stone wall or
Well,
anything?
We don't have, it's like saying you can't build your garage on your neighbor's property. We don't have to have a zoning ordinance that says you can't build your swimming pool on your neighbor's yard. You can only build your swimming pool on your yard. We don't need a zoning ordinance to say that. That's already the law, that, you know, if someone else owns property or owns rights in property, that you can't interfere with someone else's rights. And that's essentially what we have here. The city has rights in property. The underlying ownership is in the abutting homeowner, which is the case with virtually all streets in the city. The property owners on either side own to the center line of the right-of-way, but that ownership is burdened by the right of the city to construct the road and allow for vehicular and construct sidewalks and allow for pedestrian traffic, for public utilities to install overhead wires and underground pipes and conduits and so forth. So this is, I mean, it's not as serious, but if in constructing the fence, if they would have hit a water pipe or a gas line or something putting in the post, it'd be even a bigger problem, but it would be the same issue, that they would have interfered with someone else's right to use that portion of the property.
Could I,
Yes.
yeah, I should add more information so that the board can consider this before they table it or before they make a decision tonight. One thing that you mentioned, Mr. Bolton, Attorney Bolton, years ago I recognized that this was being a problem in the city, and I asked another corporation counsel at the time, yeah, can we have a fence permit or an ordinance? And the answer was, the same answer, the law says you just can't build things in the right of way, period. Why do you need a permit?
Is there a law that says you can't build things in the right of way?
Yeah, but
Common,
basically,
but you're
our,
saying-
basically our right of way.
Basically, you're saying the common law, not an ordinance.
I think there's a statute about it also. But it,
Meaning that means a state law.
yeah, our rights in the right of way include the right to prohibit structures and anything that would interfere with the vehicular and pedestrian traffic and other common uses of the right of way. For water lines, for fire hydrants and, you know, whatever.
All right,
So-
well,
Okay,
let me
can
mention.
I ask one question?
Yes.
This,
Commissioner
well,
Pat.
I'm sorry, but I'm just interested because I have gotten a lot of questions about, because when I see this picture, this irks me, because I've had a lot of people that have said that they're extremely concerned over people's neighbors' overgrown stuff. And the city says there's really nothing we can do about it. If code enforcement won't enforce it, if that's encroaching in the right of way, does this board have any say to order people to cut those back? And
Code
again, I don't mean to
enforcement.
get exercised about it, but I've gotten a lot of complaints about that.
This board has the right to tell your employees to go out and remove it, cut it down, chop it away. Code enforcement has the right to order homeowners who violate the ordinance concerning allowing overgrown grass, shrubbery,
Okay.
and whatnot, to get rid of it. And we've been, when that hasn't happened, code enforcement comes to the legal department, we've gone to court over these things.
But it doesn't even have to go to code enforcement. If it looks like this and people can't see around it, then either Parks and Rec or they can get someone to do it, and can you give the homeowner the bill if it's encroaching like this, or, you know, that you probably don't wanna get into. But we have the authority to take care of something like this.
It's not unlike,
Okay.
you've probably seen where the telephone company and the electric company sends out their trucks
Yes,
periodically
yeah,
and cuts
yeah.
parts of trees that are interfering with their
Okay.
wires. Same thing applies.
All right, well, that makes me feel better, because I thought we had to go through code. Thank you.
Commissioner Tease.
Mr. Mayor, with all due respect to Lewis and Allison, who presented a great case today, I respectfully request we table this until the next meeting where we can have additional information to make a proper decision.
So is the motion to table till the next meeting? Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you for
So
coming.
we will
You did a nice job.
consider this, well, that'll give us a
With your
chance to
house,
look
too.
at this, and it'll come up at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very
When
much.
is the next meeting? Because I know that you had a hard time finding out when you would be on the agenda. You had to find out from an attorney.
You can usually come during public comment.
Well, it'll be on the next agenda, so just look for the next meeting of the Board of Public Works, I think is already on the website, I think. But does anyone, when is it? Do we have the
It's
schedule
usually
right
the
here?
4th.
Well, I think there's a-
Well, we have November, it's Thanksgiving, so it's gonna be a
It's
little.
gonna be the Monday.
Maybe 29th.
Do you know when?
No, I thought it was,
Tuesday?
I thought it was the week before.
Oh, it is?
Low 20s, and also, it will be at wastewater.
Will be a waste.
Yeah, the next meeting.
When is but what is the date of the next meeting?
Is it the 15th? So that's Monday the 19th.
I have it as the Monday, the 19th as well.
Monday, the 19th, 5 o'clock. Now, it's scheduled for wastewater. We could put it off for 2 months if you don't want to go over there, but wastewater is where the wastewater treatment facility, I mean, it's a public facility, but it's not.
I think we're gonna go because what we didn't mention is we still have some more trees and shrubs that we purchased, and.
Well, you're welcome to come there, I'm just saying it's a
Yeah.
little harder to find, that's all. But,
We have Sandy. She knows
Yeah.
where everything is.
yeah.
I don't know where wastewater is, by the way.
Sandy, I know where.
Google it.
You'll see. Anyway, it's at the wastewater treatment facility, 'cause some wastewater.
No, please feel free to take reference them. And we also appreciate everybody that took the time to drive by and take a look ahead of the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
very
All
much.
right, now we're gonna get into this
Might as well take
presentation,
these.
but at 7, Commissioner Ackerman is gonna have to
Thank
take
you.
over, because I gotta leave at
Yeah.
7 o'clock.
Appreciate you want to take those pictures.
And I think we're gonna go past 7.
Thank you.
All right, we have aldermanic referrals. R 18079, which is authorizing the mayor and city treasurer to issue bonds not to exceed $5 million for the fiscal 2019 sewer infrastructure program. They're looking for a recommendation on this ordinance.
I'll move for a positive recommendation.
Commissioner Pappas moves to recommend passage of the ordinance. Is there any discussion, of the resolution? Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We now have R 18080, authorizing the mayor and city treasurer to issue bonds not to exceed $600,000 for various improvements at the solid waste department, Four Hills landfill.
I move for positive recommendation.
Commissioner Pappas moves to recommend passage. Is there any discussion, questions? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. And we have R 18085, authorizing the mayor and city treasurer to issue bonds not to exceed $650,000 for the purchase of 2 automated refuse trucks.
I'll move for positive recommendation, and I have a question.
Commissioner Pappas has moved for, to recommend final passage, and please ask your
So
question.
it might sound like a really stupid question, and it probably is a stupid question. So we have the money put aside in SURF. So if the money's put aside in SURF, why did we take the money from the extra money we
Well,
had?
there isn't money in SURF to cover this.
Okay.
There is not money in SURF, otherwise we would just be.
So what happens the next time? Do we start saving up for the trucks? Because my understanding was when we had approved this program where we're going to keep up with our trucks and that sort of thing, that we were going to plan for those. So I guess my question is, why weren't these planned for?
Well,
And
I think,
I
well,
thought it said that we did have money in SURF.
they're planned for, but but I think the practice was adopted a few years back, 5, 7, to begin to bond large purchases, because we weren't appropriating enough current dollars to buy every piece of equipment, especially those that are very expensive. So stuff that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, here's a $650,000 purchase. Same is true for fire trucks. Those are typically bonded now, and rather than, us having to budget $650,000 additional current dollars right now, the idea is to bond this and pay for it over the life of the truck, as opposed to pay for it up front.
Okay, so items like trash trucks that we're gonna bond, but then items like pickup trucks we don't.
Right.
Okay.
Or, I'd say the $100,000 pieces of equipment and stuff like that we're buying with cash, but things that cost
Okay.
hundreds of thousands are bonded. Now, would
Okay.
it be better to pay in cash up front? In some ways, yes, you know what I mean? But on the other hand, then you gotta come up $1 million for a fire truck this year,
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Tease had a question, or no? Commissioner Ackerman?
Yeah, just a very quick question. If I'm not mistaken, didn't we just recently vote to acquire some automated refuse trucks? And are these part of that recent?
I think what we voted to is the ones that we bonded last year, the ones that we authorized last year.
Okay, so this is above and beyond those?
Yes.
And the lead time to get these trucks, if I'm not mistaken, is close to 8 months, 9 months?
Jeff and Fleur, Superintendent Solid Waste. These are out a year now,
Okay,
So what we did a year ago is what we.
what we just got, yes.
Right.
understood. Okay, thank you.
But just to be clear, the life of these bonds is not like a 20-year thing. The life of the bonds matches
Right. Okay. No,
the life of the truck. So it's like, borrowing on a 5-year car.
Right, yeah, no, I was just confused because I thought that we were trying to pay for most of our stuff
Yeah.
up front.
Well, we'd like to. All right, but there hasn't been a vote yet.
Right.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We now have a presentation from, we have a presentation on the East Hollis and Street traffic project, and an update on the Walnut Street overlay.
Good evening, my name is Tim Cummings, I'm the Director of Economic Development for the city. I am going to quickly give you an update relative to the Oval, and then I'm going to turn it over to Julie Shizmis and our consultants to talk about the East Hollis Street project. By way of background and for the record, I am the local project manager on behalf of the state for the Department of Transportation for the East Hollis Street project, and I've been doing it in partnership and in conjunction with our transportation long-term planner, Julie Shizmis. It seemed prudent at the time to, while I gave you the overview of the presentation for the East Hollis Street, to also join in and give you a quick update, status update on the Courthouse Oval. And so relative to the Courthouse Oval, as you may or may not know, we've shut down this leg, if you will, of the Oval to help square off the site. We have had many planning documents and conversations about the idea of reintroducing the street grid as much as possible within this area of the city, basically trying to correct the roundabout nature of this urban renewal design, and try to bring in some new urbanist perspectives to this area of the city. We started this, over a year and a half ago now. It's been well received. I defer to the engineer relative to the particulars of relative to safety and whatnot, but the feedback I've gotten is it's hasn't caused any real dramatic safety issues. I know this summer the engineering department and DPW restriped the area. They can speak to that when the time comes. My office wasn't really involved with that. The one thing I will say though is we are now starting the conversation with the owner of this property about how to redevelop it. They own this land, this parcel right here, and try to encourage them to think about a development that will actually help square this site off. We've started those conversations. I actually have a meeting with the owner on Monday to continue the conversation. They have a tenant that they're interested in bringing into the site, so that will help them finance the deal. And so we look forward to that conversation. In addition to that, in this year's budget, we set aside money in the capital improvement budget for engineering services to actually start getting engineering for the squaring off of the street grid. I plan on working with Julie Shizmis to put an RFQ out sometime over the next few weeks to try to get those preliminary engineering studies done with the goal of trying to develop a plan that can be executed to try to square up this area. So that's a quick update on the Oval initiative that I know was requested. I do have a 7 o'clock meeting, so I don't want to take up too much time. Happy to take any questions on this specific project if you'd like. And then if there's no questions, I'll just call up Julie Shizmis.
Commissioner Pappas.
Do you recall the date, because I know from year to year we're supposed to approve whether we're going to put off closing down that certain area that has all the tables.
So my understanding is that's actually a decision of the infrastructure committee, and they do it in August.
We've done it. We have done.
Okay, you may have done it as well, but I'm just saying to you, I know the infrastructure committee does it typically in August. You'd be around the same time as well then.
Because it was my understanding that we had the purview over that. Because I do remember being during bad weather the first time we had approved it, and I had to have people voice concerns. I have to tell you, I find that whole area really confusing, so I never really drove into that area where where the tables were. But there are people who really liked it the other way. And what I promised was, before the Board of Public Works approved it for another year, that I would ask for at least a month or two heads up, so that people can know, so that people can know that this is going to happen. And also, when you did your presentation, I understand that that's something that you were really excited about. So the presentation was that these are the benefits. But I had, the people who had expressed concern, I said, well, how about if we get a heads up as to when this will be discussed, and then maybe instead of just saying the pros, what are the cons of having that particular little area blocked off? Because as I said, I don't go there a whole lot, and when that was opened, I just didn't use it. So, I mean, there are pros and cons to everything. So I would certainly hope that we have a little bit more of a heads up, just so that the public can be aware.
I will double check as to what the process is in terms of when that permission is necessary. I recall it being in the summertime. I'm going to say August. So I will have to look at that and get back to you.
Alderman Jettie.
So I know you said that, that you had nothing to do with the striping, and that the engineering department can speak about that when the time comes. I'm not sure when that time is going to come, but I don't want you to leave without telling you that the squaring off doesn't seem to have been a problem. But the restriping, putting parking on both sides of Chestnut Street.
On Chestnut, so this.
Excuse me.
On Walnut, right?
Walnut,
So
yeah.
putting parking on both sides of Walnut, yes.
Right. And so now, you've got parking on both sides, and you've got 2 lanes of travel and a bicycle lane. And I'm not a striping expert or a traffic expert by any means, but I can tell you that there's not enough room for all of those things.
It's a little confusing.
It's not confusing. People, I stood at the corner between School and West Pearl Street, and I watched cars come along, and there was not a single vehicle that stayed within those lanes. So the cars coming around, and whether it was the left lane or the right lane, the people in the right lane went into the bicycle lane, and the people in the left lane went into the right lane. There's just not enough room.
How fast were those cars going?
I couldn't.
So the origin of this whole thing was that, was the people who live at Clock Tower complained in a meeting and subsequent that, this whole area is very, very, we got 600 people living there, whatever it is. Very, very pedestrian unfriendly. The sea of pavement, 3 lanes wide. They can barely get across. Could we paint the intersection? So James Vail worked for the city at that time and came up with basically this plan, and said, could we paint this so that the crosswalks would be there, and so that pedestrians would be given at least some consideration in the way things worked in that oval. And one particular safety problem they articulated had to do with the fact that there were 3 lanes coming north on Walnut, which were that there was one, the one lane that goes to the right towards where, your office, Factory Street, and then there were 2 lanes that sort of go left. And they complained that they would try to be kind of trying to turn from one of those 2 lanes into the left and go into their parking lot. But that, for example, if they went if they were here and they were turning, and I forget exactly what they were describing because it's been, you know, like quite a while ago, but they were here, but then this other car, which was next to them, also making a left, would be doing this, and they would almost have an accident right in here because they're trying to get over to their driveway. So there was a lot of confusion with respect to the two left turn lanes. So they asked, as a both as a kind of pro-pedestrian thing and as a safety measure, that the number of lanes be reduced to 2 lanes rather than 3.
So my point, Mayor, is that there are now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lanes. There are 2 parking lanes.
Right.
Yeah.
And you've got 2 automobile lanes and 1 bicycle lane.
Yes.
And there's not enough room for all of those lanes, in my opinion. So I don't know how valuable the parking is. I spoke to.
Well, the parking's become a problem on the right side.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
So what we've got, so we're trying to, you know, this, of course, this all becomes kind of a work in progress, but here, the parking right here has become a problem in a couple of respects. Number one, when the bus now stops, they can't get next to the curb because there's a bus stop.
Well, I think that's been remedied. They've eliminated the parking.
That parking's still out there, I think, isn't there? Aren't there still
No.
2 spaces out there?
No, they-
Right here?
Restricted.
What? Like today or something?
No, it's been a while.
I don't know, I don't think so. I just looked like a couple days ago, but anyway, it's become, these people are having problems with it too, so
Yeah.
maybe I'm out of date, I don't know.
But-
Last time I looked, the parking was still there.
It's a good point to describe it as it's a work in progress. And we're evolving to try to make this area, which is not very pedestrian friendly, but happens to also be in your urban inner core area, more pedestrian friendly. And this is philosophical, and so you need to decide the direction you want to go, but you know, to create a pedestrian friendly environment, you're gonna need to slow the cars down, and one of the ways you can do that is by creating the type of lanes that were out there. I think, you know, it's an education to help people understand how the new configuration has been laid out. I think the engineering department did a great job in terms of laying out a very thoughtful process that is gonna need to be tweaked along the way, but it helps accomplish a lot of the goals that the city has been trying to achieve in terms of adding parking, adding a bike lane, and also still maintaining a good, healthy amount of lanes for the automobiles, which, you know, is obviously our major way of transit. So it's an evolving process.
Okay, so I appreciate that, and when you say it's a work in
Process. Yeah.
I hope it's processing. And you said it, you know, we've got to decide. I would strongly urge us to decide that we've got to eliminate, you know, either parking on the right side or parking on the left side. Probably the right side, which would be the east side, would make more sense. There's just not enough room. When you come out of High Street, so when they initially did the restriping, the mayor is right. There was parking right at right at that. What is that? That's the
It's right by
east.
the parking,
The Ace Highway parking lot.
yeah, the parking lot for National Wallpaper.
Right.
Yeah. So at the intersection of High Street and Walnut Street, there's a bus stop there,
Right.
and there was parking, and the bus, that was a problem. They've eliminated that, but there's still parking. You know, they've eliminated like 1 bus length of parking. There's still parking.
Yeah, there's still a couple spots, right?
Yeah, there's still parking spots.
Yeah.
And when you come out of High Street, the visibility is impeded by those parking.
Back here.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
And then you got a parking spot to the north of High Street.
Right here.
Yeah,
Right here. Yep.
right.
Yep.
And so, when you're coming out of High Street, if you want to go to Chestnut Street, you've got to cross, that travel lane, and then and there's not a whole lot of room, the parking on the west side, just the way those lanes are, those lanes are so narrow, it's difficult for someone coming out of High Street to make a right turn and then a left turn on, to the oval part onto Chestnut Street. And the traffic, the people going into Clock Tower at 5 o'clock at night, there's a backup that occurs, and it's hard to find an opening, and so people become very aggressive, and it's not a good situation currently.
We'll continue to look at that.
Okay.
That's a good point. So the last comment I'm going to make is this is, if the city desires to continue with reintroducing the street grid in this area, this would be one of the major first steps. Everything is interconnected, as you all know, into the one-way reversal, and we should really have a conversation at some point, sooner rather than later, whether the city really wants to pursue the one-way reversal, because this, from an infrastructure and a capital spending standpoint, designing and planning and then actually executing the infrastructure for this intersection in particular and this intersection in particular is really critical to the bigger picture of a one-way reversal, which I know we've been discussing on and off over the last 2 years. And so time is going to come where the city is going to need to make that decision. And you want to leverage the opportunity of redeveloping this site. I mean, this is a private sector entity that could bring in more tax dollars, more jobs, and I would just suggest from an economic development perspective, we would really want to create a public-private partnership with someone in this area right here to help leverage that opportunity, one, to take the burden off of the taxpayers, and then two, to make it a better urban environment.
So this kind of thing is not unique to Nashua in the sense that this is the whole urban renewal area. So a bunch of stuff, whole neighborhood got torn down in here, And from, Braunstein, the Plus Company, this, and over here too, probably.
Yeah.
Maybe over, and, I guess they thought at the time that would make things better. But like a lot of other places, it's been there for 60 years and there's really no fill-in. There's nothing really happened. It's very hard to reclaim, kind of this area that's been torn down and then just a bunch of concrete and, traffic patterns put in there. And so the idea is to kind of bring this back to a scale that's like a city rather than like a super highway area. Downtown, not a super highway. Alderman Jettie.
So I got 2 more points if you have time. So as you're talking to the owner of that oval area,
Yep.
It's as you're talking to him about redevelopment, I suppose one of the ways of solving the Walnut Street problem as it currently exists is to if you wanted to keep parking on the left side, parking on the west side and parking on the east side, and the 2 travel lanes and the bicycle lane, maybe he would be willing to let us take some land there to widen Walnut Street to provide for that. The other point is, when you're talking about the one-way, I know you've talked about making Central Street, making West Pearl Street, reversing the one-way so that West Pearl Street would be going east, so that there'd be a direct shot from the Broad Street Parkway to Main Street, and that you're talking about reversing Factory Street, which currently goes east, making that west. What about that, where your arrow is right there? What about that area? Is that gonna stay 2-way?
That's a great question. I would think it would. I think I think, I don't know, I would have to go back and look at the recommendations made by VHB. I think VHB, Steve, you may know this better than I, they may have actually said.
It would have to be.
Bring it to,
You'd have
yeah,
to
bring
still
it-
get to,
Yeah.
you'd still need to be able to get to Water Street.
I was gonna say Water Street is the issue.
Otherwise, Water Street would become one way.
So you're gonna have traffic coming west on Factory Street, and you're gonna have traffic going east, crossing onto to Water Street.
Unless you reverse Water Street.
Unless, yeah.
But,
Of course, they also make a recommendation maybe even to shut Water Street down.
yeah.
I was also looking at.
There is a traffic study which we haven't looked at in a little while. So, but I'm guessing it left that
I think it
little
leaves it.
section two ways, yeah.
Yeah, I think it does, you have to get to Water Street.
So you're probably talking a traffic light?
I don't know, we would need to design it, we're not even at, at that point, I think they were really just talking about, the real street light necessary was in this area right here.
There would be a conflict right at that corner.
Yeah.
Because it'd be two ways coming into one way.
Yeah, I think we would have to look at it.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Interesting. All right.
So with that being said, Julie
Oh.
Schizmith for,
Julie is here to go over the East Hollis Street.
that's right, thank you.
Does everybody know Julie? Probably not.
Okay.
Hi there.
Why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure, will do. I am Julie Chismus. I am, as Ken said, the long-range and transportation planner working for Sarah Marchant within the Community Development Division. But I've been a transportation planner in the National Region since about 2009, so I'm helping out Tim on this project. This is a federally funded project, and earlier this year, the city contracted with McFarland Johnson to conduct an engineering study, and this evening, Brian Coburn, senior project engineer with MJ, will be presenting information about that study, which did include several public information sessions and resulted in the selection of a preferred alternative. Joining Brian are Brian Coburn, are Brian Patinskis, right? Who's an associate engineer with MJ, and also Jonathan Law, who's a senior associate with CRJA Landscape Architects. And I just want to thank you in advance for your time, and do feel free to ask questions as Brian gives his presentation.
This presentation took an hour and a half last night, and we gave it to the board of the infrastructure committee, so I'm going to condense it significantly tonight for you. Yeah.
Brian,
Commissioner Tees.
I just wanted to apologize in advance. I need to leave for 7 o'clock, so it has nothing to do with the content.
And I need to leave.
Can't do it
at
that
7
quickly,
o'clock.
I'm afraid.
I need to
Come on,
leave
chop,
in
chop.
like 2 minutes. I mean,
All right,
So Commissioner Ackerman's going to take over. It'll go better with him anyway.
All right, so as Julie said, if I do go too fast and say something that sparks a question, feel free to interrupt me, and we'll get that question answered right away. So just a project overview, the red dashed line is the limits of our project. That boundary was defined as when the city applied for the grant from New Hampshire DOT for this project. This does have a $2.8 million construction budget right now. 80% of that is being funded by the Federal Highway Administration, and 20% of the local match is actually covered by turnpike toll credits. So currently no city money involved in this project. But East Hollis and Bridge Street, with the intersection being the main focus, but we are extending down East Hollis and Bridge to about C Street is where we were reviewing. So we did have a steering committee formed back in March when we started to help us bounce ideas off of and act as a conduit for some stakeholders. These are the members, fair amount of city staff, alderwomen. We did have representatives from Hudson involved as well as some of the abutters and local businesses in the area. Just to frame our project a little bit better, we are looking at things more than just cars. We're looking at bicycles and pedestrians as part of this project. We've committed to not make traffic conditions worse, obviously, but there are other goals we're trying to accomplish, which I'll get into in a minute. We realize that a lot of the traffic that goes through this area is regional in nature. Heavy east-west movement, just because we have a bridge over the river, which there aren't that many of. This project is not intended to try to solve that issue. It's really just looking at the intersection and the surrounding area itself. And there were previous studies done, both on the, the East Hall Street corridor as well as the intersection itself. We started with those, reviewed them, and used those as kind of our launching pad. A little bit about the process we have to go through because we're using federal money. New Hampshire DOT is involved, so they review our work. They've broken down the project in 4 steps. Currently, it's step 1, which is the engineering study. The purpose is to define a preferred alternative. Once we get that established, DOT review it and release us onto preliminary and final design, where we work out all the details, and then we'll move into the 4th step, which is actually constructing the project. Currently, we're targeting either late 2019 to start construction, or more than likely first thing 2020. These are the steps we do as part of an engineering study, just really gathering data, both from plans and really getting out into the public and making sure we understand the issues that are occurring at the location. One of the first things we did, both with the steering committee and the general public, is hold a public listening session where, before we've really done any sort of brainstorming of ideas, we make sure we listen from the community so we know the issues we're trying to solve. That occurred back in April for that. We had a public alternatives workshop in August after we developed our ideas, and now we're at our final public involvement steps we're presenting to the city boards. These are the 4 main topics we heard at the listening sessions. Safety, obviously, traffic, access, both for vehicles getting to the new developments in the north of the intersection, Riverside Landing, as well as the Crown Street area in general. The potential for a future train station was mentioned. We also did hear about pedestrian access to the river, and not actually getting to the water of the river, but just to the top of the dike there. There's a path that people seem to be interested in. Aesthetics was also a big topic, both from people entering the city and wanting to have a visually pleasing gateway entering from the east, but also for the residents of the area. They felt like they've maybe lost some amenities in the recent history, either between the development that occurred, and so they're interested in seeing this project maybe enhance the aesthetics of the neighborhood and give them something they can use as well. All that helped us generate our purpose and needs statement, which in summary is just to move traffic as efficiently as you can, but also facilitate access to both the north and the south, with the goal of facilitating adjacent land use. Again, not adversely impacting traffic while we're trying to do these things, and then provide an aesthetically pleasing gateway. And so this is the bar at which we measured our alternatives. The needs for these were, obviously we have daily traffic congestion in the morning and evening commuter times, a general lack of bicycle and pedestrian accommodations there now, merging vehicles, specifically if you're coming out of Hudson heading down East Hall Street, right after that light, 2 lanes drop to 1, kind of like a drag strip type scenario, so that safety issue is mentioned. There's limited access to the Crown Street area right now, and Riverside Landing, and just the openness and barrenness of the area was perceived as not being a welcoming gateway into the city. As I mentioned in the previous studies, these were the alternatives that were reviewed before. Varied from just taking the existing intersection and adding sidewalks and bike lanes. Looked at roundabouts, different traffic signal configurations, and even introducing one-way streets, turning East Halston Bridge Street into one-way and creating more couplet type traffic movement. Anything that really relied on yield signs was dismissed, and we did take a look at a roundabout when we got on the project as well, because there have been some studies that said it would work, some studies that said it wouldn't work. So we took a fresh look at it and did confirm that just the way traffic enters this intersection, yield signs are just don't cut it. Really needs traffic signals to make sure everybody gets a fair amount of time to get to where they want to go, provide the gas they need. And unfortunately, yield signs just did not cover it, which is what a roundabout relies on. Oops.
Did we lose our mouse? Great.
Key to battery?
Yeah.
This is not why it took an hour and a half. Let's make it.
I didn't use it, but that
Yes.
doesn't mean it's not gonna die again.
So we ended up with 3 alternatives. I'll briefly describe these first 2. They're not the preferred alternative. The third one is, but I will go through them. So in general, you'll see 4 slides for each alternative. The first one is more or less an engineering plan of what this project would construct. The next slide will be showing the alternative with a conceptual connection to Crown Street area. This project won't construct that, but as it was one of our goals for the project, we wanted to at least understand how each of these would function with that possible new connection. And then there'll be 2 slides showing the landscape opportunities that we're providing. First will be what this project can fund, both from a budget perspective, and there are certain things DOT will let us spend their money on. There are other things they won't. And then the 4th slide is really a what-if scenario for the landscaping and streetscape. If the city wanted to appropriate some more of their own money, what types of ideas could be implemented. Alternative 1 is essentially the same traffic pattern that exists today. So we would add bicycle lanes, narrow the lanes up a little bit to slow traffic down, and add a better sidewalk network to make sure it's easier to get along Bridge Street and East Hall Street, and for people to get from Riverside Landing to the other side, especially as I think children come into that neighborhood and are starting to walk to school. It was noted there's really no way to get across that intersection right now. So we want to make sure we provided that. We'll pass out our decision matrix now so you can start to look at that. This is a piece of paper we use to try to summarize how each alternative addressed all of those needs and purpose statements we had. These are color-coded schemes, so green was considered favorable, red was not. There are the traffic operations for each alternative are listed. We report traffic operations by level of service and by letter. Just to explain that a little bit, it's a lot like school. If you see an A, that's very good. Very little delay for traffic. When you start to see E's and F's, that's considered more delay than is acceptable in a certain situation. So you see now, the current condition, there's a fair amount of delay at this intersection. People stopping at the light. But there are certain movements that see very little delay. So for instance, East Hall Street heading into Hudson, they have free movement onto the bridge. People coming from Bridge Street from Hudson have this free movement onto Bridge Street. They do have to contend with this light here at D Street, but in general, they don't have any delay. The only people that see delay right now are the people that have to cross each other right here. So from a purely processing traffic perspective, this is probably the most efficient setup to have. Obviously, there's drawbacks with it's difficult to get pedestrians through. Green spaces is somewhat fragmented, and the access to and from Riverfront Landing and future Crown Street, there's only so much we can do. So both those locations in the intersection, really only a right turn in and a right turn out can be provided Other movements would have to occur other locations. So for instance, Riverfront Landing is going to would continue to rely on this signal to make a left and head back into Hudson. People from the Crown Street area would continue to use Ald and Arlington Street to make a left onto East Hall Street, and then have to use one of the side streets to get to Bridge Street. And I should have mentioned that one of the other aspects we heard about during the public process was residents of D and E Street. One of their issues was a lot of side street cut through right now. To get into Riverfront Landing from East Hall Street, you have to come down D Street, so they're seeing more traffic. So we did hear that. I'm just going to go through your slides real quick, if that's all right.
Sure.
Jonathan's here to ask questions. So this is what the project would implement for streetscape. Mostly street trees. We've got a better sidewalk network. One of the main purposes we have for the street trees is that's our gateway feature. That was the preferred option when discussing with the steering committee to provide that welcoming feeling to the city is street trees. And also by putting them adjacent to the road, studies have shown that actually can calm traffic better than other aspects. So that's what the project could afford. This is kind of a what-if scenario. We could put in a lot more trees, and then this would be the space adjacent to E Street where you can see some neighborhood amenities put in, whether it be a splash pad, a toddler park, playground, community garden. I mean, those are the types of ideas that were thrown out. And it could look like something like this. So this is more or less hovering over where the current traffic light is, looking back at E Street here in the background. So this is the community garden here and what a toddler park.
And the amenities are included in this full build option, as we're calling it, based on feedback received from the steering committee and when we held public listening sessions. So we just didn't pick things out of the sky and put them in there. It was based on what the local neighbourhood wanted to see.
Okay.
The fencing hopefully won't cause as much issue as previously tonight.
Some of the feedback we received at our public meeting back in August, people were accepting of the fact that the traffic pattern remained, it's familiar to them. They recognize construction probably wouldn't be that bad since we wouldn't be building a lot of new roads in different locations. But some of the drawbacks we heard is why spend really any money on the intersection if we're not changing anything. There's no improvement to the merging traffic on East Hall Street under this scenario, and D Street would continue to see that cut through traffic because this option would require the signal at D Street to remain. It's temporary now, it would simply become permanent. Yes?
Before you go to alternative 2, in alternative 1 with the enhanced landscaping, how much was the cost to the city beyond what the federal government was going to?
So the difference between that and that?
Yes.
$620,000.
Thank you.
But, however, this is designed in such a way that it can be phased. So say you do the western island first, you can do that and vice versa. You don't have to do all the tree planting at once and things like that. So.
Another thing I'll point out is you see on all of our options, we are planning on incorporating a path from the roadway elevation down to the levee elevation.
Which again was another important component that people wanted to see, connections back to the river.
So alternative 2 is kind of stems from the roundabout idea. We realized the only way to make that work is really put signals at every entrance point. So that's what this turned out to look like. So traffic would circulate kind of in a counterclockwise fashion, but have a signal controlling each of the movements. You see in the on our decision matrix, this movement here sees a change now. So it used to be an A or a B. And now that we have them stop at a light, fair amount of traffic, they're now down at a worse level of service. So they would see more delay under this option. Similarly, East Hollis Street heading into Hudson, again, that was free before. They now have a light. I try to keep the lights as simple as we can, where just like the X, there's really only 2 phases, one direction goes in the other. That would be similar here and here. This would have 3 phases with this road going, then this road, then this road. They would be coordinated. That's a question we get a lot is, this heavy movement, once this is green, that light would be green for them at the same time. So it wouldn't be trapping a lot of people in this area here. But you can see one of the drawbacks of this is we have a pretty good green space, but now it's got road all around it, and it's not adjacent to the neighborhood street. Another factor with this one is to have the future Crown Street connection come in. It would actually introduce a 4th light. So some of the movements now would have to go through 3 signals to make their turns, as opposed to the one they do now. The landscaping that the project could afford under this option is less than alternatives 1 and 3. Mainly because this is our most expensive to build with the 3 or 4 traffic lights and the new roadway. So the landscaping budget got trimmed because we tried to keep everything within that $2.8 million budget set by the state. But again, under a full build out, we could still fit all of the amenities that we show, but now it's somewhat fragmented. So you would have some amenities adjacent to E Street, but we'd have to put some in this middle area. Difficult to get to.
The cost of this option is around $880,000.
So that's what that would look like. This is, East Street is on your right, and the new roadway would be on your left. So we didn't have any supporters of this alternative at our public meeting. People did note needing 3 traffic signals to get through your movement, more delay for some of the vehicles, and a lot of people mentioned it just seemed to be a confusing layout for people to have to go around somewhat in a circle and make certain movements. So this was alternative 3. This was a concept that was also included in the study back in 2015. Just uses 2 traffic signals to control the movements. Traffic operates, again, this movement here that's free now would have to stop at a light, and same here. Some things we've noted recently in discussion is an issue right now is people coming from East Hollis and people that are coming from Bridge. They have their own lane to get into, but a lot of times they're not in the lane they want to be in. There's people on Bridge that want to get in the right lane. There's people on East Hollis that want to get in the left lane, and there can be some friction there as everybody's trying to get into the right spot. Under this alternative, that decision could happen right here, where they could get in the lane they want to be in. And same with this group, they could get in the lane they want to be in. Because once they're in, they have a light. When they're green, they can just continue on in their lane. There'd be no more of that mixing, assuming everybody picks the right lane at first. Again, the signals would be coordinated, so this movement would stay green to go through that. These people would have the green light. This would be green to go as well.
Will it cut down on the cut-throughs?
Yes. Yep. So this option doesn't require a D Street signal. So everybody that wants to get to Riverfront Landing can come through here, make the left, and then go straight in. We kept the driveway there just we need to maintain that access, but the light wouldn't be there. A little bit more about the traffic. You know, we had this bar set as don't make traffic worse. It's hard to judge as you look at this because some letters get better, some letters get worse. Some of the ones that get worse are pretty significant volume of traffic that happens. So we were really looking at queue length, you know, the amount of cars that back up during those times, and this operates similar to what it does today in terms of queue lengths. We've been able to do that somewhat by, you know, right now the traffic on Bridge Street that stops here is one lane, and we split them into 2 lanes, so we've been able to mitigate that. And you know, we have to stop this traffic, so we've given them as 2 lanes as far as we can. Traffic, so that we've modeled this with our traffic software. The queues don't back up into Hudson and cause any issues with their signal system. I think the other thing to point out is when you're looking at traffic here is this is one location in a larger network. When you look at that network and you're looking at signals on East Hall Street, signals on Bridge Street, these signals, and then the signals in Hudson, really what's controlling the capacity of that whole network is Hudson's signal system. They have a lot more movements they need to accommodate. They have 3 signals in that triangle pattern. So we're confident that this is not going to start to be the pinch point. I mean, that would still be the control on their side, and this would process traffic, you know, similar to how it does today. And this would all be set up for a future Crown Street connection. Your 2 signals would already be there. You might need to add a 1 mast arm when that road is built, but it all lines up. Landscaping, this is what the budget could afford, again, street trees to get that gateway feature and achieve some traffic calming. And then this is what the project, the what if scenario.
So I just want to add to this, so the cost for this would be around $720,000, but in terms of landscape and providing public open space, which we heard is a big deal, this is the best option. And in option 1, there's 2 spaces to the east and west that are similar to this, but on the north and south, you have 2 wasted green spaces. With this, all this space can be programmable for open, public, usable space.
One of the things we've done in the matrix there is we've summarized the size of these spaces to give you a sense. We just to point out, this space is now 1 acre in size, so it's a fair amount of area. And that's what that space could look like. So as we get into our decision matrix, again, we have mobility we were looking at, access, land use, traffic operations, aesthetics, and the neighborhood amenities, and obviously the cost. So, and again, summarize those on a green, yellow, red, red seal. So we presented these for the public. After hearing that feedback, we went back to our steering committee and discussed the pros and cons of the 3. And the alternative 3 was the one that was unanimously selected by that group as the preferred alternative. Carried forward. Balancing between traffic operations and providing the access that I think we want in this area, as well as the aesthetics. Green space. So definitely under an hour and a half, which is good. Yes, any questions? I know I went through that fairly quickly. Happy to answer any questions. Great.
When are you thinking of it's going to be implemented? 2019, 2020, was it?
Yes. Yeah, it takes some time to get through the DOT process, their reviews and different stuff. So the earliest we would probably be out there is 2019, but more likely in the spring of 2020.
and I did have an opportunity to attend the public comment, and there was a lot of good dialogue that went on, so this was a nice overview. I recall something about one of the alternatives had a Phase 5 lighting system, but I didn't hear any mention of it tonight, or 5-phase. Is that alternative 2, where we just have to cycle through the light 5 different times before people would get through?
Oh.
Is
I don't
that-
think there was a 5. We tried to keep the signals to like 3
Okay.
phase or 4 phase.
Okay.
Some are 2, which operate a little bit better.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Julie, any other? Yes, Alderman Jettie.
So, is this a done deal? Whoever makes this decision has made it, or is there a decision to be made by somebody about which alternative is chosen? And
So it's the city's decision. We were at the Committee on Infrastructure last night to get their concurrence that they support the preferred alternative. We're here tonight to get this board's concurrence that this should be the preferred alternative. To make sure we don't continue to spend design money on something that the city won't support. Nothing's done until we actually put shovels in the ground, so it's not like a decision can be unmade, but once we get concurrence that this is the way the city, this is the direction the city wants to go, our next step is to engineer this, get construction plans together. So there'd just be a couple steps back that we would need to take if the decision changes later on.
By looking at the agenda that we had for this evening, the information, this was going to be informational only this evening. We'll talk to the Director of Public Works and bring it up at a future meeting, maybe next month, for a motion to move forward.
Okay.
Okay? Julie, you okay with that?
Yep, yep. I know that we did have some discussion prior to this meeting because we weren't sure which committee, I wasn't sure, I should say, not everybody, I wasn't sure, which committee actually had the approval rights, I guess would be the statement, to make a concurring decision, and my understanding was it actually was the Committee on Infrastructure. And so when we went before them last night, we did hear support from the committee, and the Planning and Economic Development Committee was also in attendance. We did a joint meeting, so we wanted to make sure that they were all on board, and also heard support for Alternative 3 from members of that committee. But
Well, that's
so-
great. No, that's usually how it goes.
Okay.
They make a favorable recommendation, they'll probably present it to the director, and the director will bring it to our meeting subsequent to tonight. But
Sure,
thank you.
and if you'd like any other information at that next meeting, let me know or let Tim know. We're happy to come back and provide any other additional information.
Excellent.
When Lisa can be here.
One last question, Mr. Judy?
just a comment. I was at the meeting last night. I'm on the Infrastructure Committee and the Planning and Economic Development Committee. And, there were some favorable comments about 3, but there was no vote taken to approve it. So I just want to make that clear that they really haven't made a decision, although it seemed to be 3 seemed to be where everybody was going.
And just my observation through the public comment that was, I think it was in April, that, not Birch Hill, it was the Dr. Chris School,
Yeah.
is that, I don't know where I was gonna go with that. It was, never mind, forget it, we'll move on. Anything else, commissioners?
Well, I would
Yes,
think
sir.
we would have to vote on this as well. We have jurisdiction over all roads in the city, so at some point, it would have to come back to
Sure.
this board for approval,
Sure.
All right,
so.
very good.
And I don't know what the timeline is, but I guess the sooner the better.
Well, we'd like to get our engineering study in, just to keep on our schedule. And really all we need to say in that study is that the governing bodies in support. I don't know that we need an official vote to put it in. Again, the goal is to just make sure that we don't start spending design money on something the city's not comfortable with.
And I think that's the line between what we need to do for the DOT and the federal funding side versus what we need to do from the city side as far as getting those official approvals and whatnot, so.
I think, so it's a work in progress. I'm sure we'll bring it up. I'm sure the infrastructure will act on it shortly, as well as this board. But the comment that I was gonna make was, through the criteria that you had at the very front end of this whole thing, is that none of this is going to substantially increase the traffic flow from Nashua all the way over through Hudson, because this is just focusing on this side of the bridge. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yep. But that was by design.
Well, one more.
Yes, sir.
I think, unless you're opposed, but I think a favorable recommendation may be something that we could do tonight, so they can move ahead with this report. If
I have no objection.
Why don't you make a motion?
right, for your report, a favorable recommendation on the alternative 3, as presented.
All right. Any other discussion relative to that motion?
I think that it was a very, very well thought out, and I like the process. It was a good process, and I appreciate it.
Very good. All those in favor of favorable recommendation?
Aye.
Say aye. Aye.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Very good.
much for your
Thank
time.
you. All right. We will very quickly move over to Parks and Recreation. If Superintendent would like to join us at the table. And if I'm not mistaken, we have a presentation and an update on the Greeley Park Boat Ramp Project.
Won't be an hour and a half, though.
I've heard that before.
Good evening. Nick Caggiano, National Parks and Rec Department. And with me today is Kevin Gagne. He's a professional engineer and project manager with Stantec Corp. Out of Bedford. And he's known in the state as Mr. Boat Ramp. So Kevin's got some pretty good stuff. So if we can see, I'm going to go quickly. As you know, one of the things on my bucket list was improvements to the Greeley Park Boat Ramp. We started looking at this in 2003, worked with Fish and Game, got a grant, and unfortunately the grant kind of sizzled away because of conflicts with the railroad, at the railroad crossing at Hills Ferry. Through the years, we have finally negotiated civil language between us and the railroad about the crossing. So we're finally able to move forward. We've had 2 public meetings that have gone very well. We've heard the neighbors. So we wanted to give you a quick update on where we're at, what things may look like. The next steps are we got to go to full design with planning board, board of aldermen, all that stuff. But I wanted to let you know what's going on. It's pretty exciting, actually. So everyone knows that the boat ramp's at the end of Hills Ferry Road. It's the only access to the Merrimack for quite a significant area. And it's very critical in the emergency response system with police and fire. It's very important that they're able to utilize this to respond to any emergencies on the river. Next slide, please. So here's the recent history. 2002-07, we worked with Fish and Game to improve it. And again, the railroad kind of threw a wrench into the works. The Waterways Committee included recommendations to redevelop the boat ramp. The Lower Merrimack Local Advisory Committee is advocating for this. In 2016, we applied for a Land and Water Conservation Fund grant. We petitioned New Hampshire DOT to resolve the railroad crossing, and we came to an agreement just before a formal hearing, so they kind of didn't want to go to a court situation. We came to agreement in early 2017. The grant was awarded with a total of $400,000, 50% from LWCF, and there's a 50% match from the city. And in 2018, there was a project kickoff with public outreach and an RFP. Go ahead, Diane, thanks. We met with the neighborhoods, and what the neighborhood, it was very adamant about was They wanted to improve the conditions down there. The boat ramp's in very poor shape. There's a bad stormwater location pipe for that pipe. They wanted to reduce the amount of bad behavior that sometimes occurs down there, and unauthorized trash disposal. They wanted to make sure it was very well signed, because a lot of people looking for it end up turning around in people's driveways. And they wanted to make sure that police and fire had what they needed to respond to any problems down there. Go ahead, Diane. So here are the existing conditions. You can see here's what parking is, which is basically through the trees, and here's the steepness of the boat ramp, and every year we have to put some material down here, and we have to end up calling tow trucks, because it evidently always happens that someone's going to get towed out of there 2 or 3 times a year. When you do launch your boat, if the water's high, you have to be careful of that storm pipe, because if you don't get in it in time and get your motor started, you're headed downstream to the pipe. So with that, I'm going to let Kevin take over. He's going to go through the rest of it, and go from there.
Great, thank you. And I am excited to be here. Very little bit about myself, because I know we just want to zip, zip, zip. I have been designing all the public boating access facilities for the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department as a consultant since 2002. So if you name it, I probably worked on it, if you're familiar with it. So I know a lot about this kind of project. I think that's obviously why we were selected. So I'll jump right to what we're proposing to do here. The existing conditions on this site, I created this graphic just to show you, give you a sense of scale for the size of the parcel we're talking about, and then when I get to it, to show you what the size of the proposed project is. A little bit of statistics. We're looking at 32 acres here of land, roughly, very close. A total of 31.4 acres is vegetated, and existing impervious materials, which consist of the gravel access road and some pavement at the ramp, amount to about 1.05 acres of impervious material. So if you go to the next slide, at the same scale, you'll see the extent of what we're proposing to do here. Ultimately, the addition of gravel surface materials for the parking area and circulation road, which I'll cover in more detail in a second. The connection, the more direct connection to the site, obviously makes it easier for users as well as for emergency access vehicles. Is a big component of what we're doing here. Overall, because we're going to propose to take and gate off this existing portion of the road, take about 3 or 4 feet of it and revegetate it and let it turn back to nature. We're going to allow that to just remain as a footpath. It's actually going to be about 12 feet wide, though. It's still going to be able to let the city trucks get through if they need to access that area for maintenance or whatever. So that is going to do a lot to offset. Doesn't seem like much, 3 or 4 feet, but it's very long. So when you add up the square footage of area that we're going to take back from impervious and turn it into pervious, it does offset quite a bit what we're doing here. So in the end, the proposed site is going to result in about a 0.6 acre increase in impervious. So the next slide kind of zooms in on the site itself. And I'll just go over the specifics of the site, and then rather than, I think, belabor any point, turn it to you to see if you want to learn any more about any of these particular aspects of the project. One thing I'll just jump to, because it was the last thing that Nick mentioned, was the stormwater outlet. One thing we're looking to do as part of this whole stormwater system that we're going to be developing here is see if we can utilize the existing depression which exists here, along with the proposed systems that we're putting in, bioretention, or otherwise known as rain gardens, if we can actually limit the need for eliminate the outfall in its current form. We'll certainly have overflow and the opportunity for it to exit the site down the sides of the ramp over land instead of by pipe, and then hopefully eliminate this obstruction. And we're looking at ways of potentially using the head wall itself closer to the shore, maybe to put a tie-up ring on or something so that someone has the convenience of being able to tie their boat up while they drive back up. So the specifics, we have in total 24 parking spaces, 12 trailered for trailered vehicles, and 12 what we call car top parking spaces. And these are ones, these are just a car that may have a canoe or kayak on the roof, primarily, but if someone's coming to visit the site and just in a car, that's where they would park. So we have an equal number of canoe and kayak parking spaces as well as trailer spots. We have, of those 12, 2 different types. We have one each that's van accessible. Okay, so that includes an extra wide spot next to it, of course. ADA accessibility is a big component of the site. Talk about one of the unique features we're proposing in a second. The overall approach to designing the site, we realize that these sites are, by definition, in environmentally sensitive areas. Again, public building access site, so it's near the water. So we have developed a sort of rapport with DES and an understanding of what's needed from a standpoint of low impact design to make these things as least impacting as possible. And so we follow the existing drainage patterns and the existing topography to the extent possible. There is sort of a rise, a steep berm that runs through the site, which we have to smooth out a bit in order to get the slopes we want for ADA accessibility. But largely, we're maintaining and sort of following the contour of the land here. The layout itself makes use of 45-degree parking, which is the most user-friendly component. A lot of boaters don't have great control over their trailers, and 90-degree parking is the easiest to get into and out of for a novice user, as opposed to something like perpendicular, which is very non-user friendly. This is a one-way circulation, clockwise versus counterclockwise, because clockwise allows you to get into a position here to back down the ramp in a way that you see a trailer out the driver's side door instead of the passenger door, which is a more difficult way to back up. So we've also got ample space here for the vehicle that the city would be using to also be able to come into this space and back up for emergency access. I did mention the stormwater areas, so we've got all of these. We've got the existing access road. We've got the parking areas and the lanes pitched different directions to separate the flow to prevent the concentration of flow on gravel surfaces, which then ends up carrying materials, causing ruts and so on. So it's sort of broken up into these 4 relatively equal areas. These are not giant ponds. These are shallow depressions which are going to have natural vegetation and not going to be filled with water all the time. They're rain gardens, they're bioretention areas. So they just eventually are going to look like the forest, but that's where the water's going to go. They are also interconnected. You know, this one overflows and goes down in here. This will overflow if it does. Also has an outlet control and goes into the existing area here. This one would also join that water, and this one could overflow by a pipe to a swale along the side here. So the only wetland impacts on the site, we have a lot of permitting to do. We have the big 3 up at this state. We have the alteration of terrain permit, which is going to closely govern the design of all these drainage BMPs. We've got the shoreland permit, and we've got the wetlands dredge and fill permit. The only wetlands dredge and fill on the site is just that which is associated with the bottom of the ramp. So it's actually a very small area. Finally, I'll mention this very unique feature. It's something that I learned about through the New Hampshire Fishing Game Department. It's something we've had on our radar from a fishing game standpoint to try to put on the site, and it hasn't been done yet. It's called a pre-launch platform. It's used more widely in Washington State and Montana, and there are some actual sort of Forest Service details that were developed that we're kind of using as guidelines. We've also talked to them about their use. What it essentially is an opportunity and a place right here for similar to a van accessible site where a trailer vehicle can pull up here. Someone in a wheelchair can get out of the car and they can go up a ramp to a 2-level platform. One's at 2 feet high, one's at 2.5 feet high. The vehicle then can be pulled ahead so that the trailered boat is accessible from these open platforms. So it allows the person in the wheelchair to get into the boat where you don't have an opportunity because of long, steep site grades to get down to the waterfront and get in through some sort of a dock system. So another reason for being incapable of doing a dock system here is because they simply don't work on the site like this, the Merrimack River, unless you put in a $500,000 5-foot diameter tube guide pile system like you see down in Lowell, for example. So even those, we've had many fish and game sites where the forces of nature and ice just rip out very expensive piles that you have to go put back in the year after. So because we can't get a person into the actual boat feasibly through a system down here, that's where this idea comes into play. And it's, again, been used very successful somewhere else, elsewhere in a number of spots. We're really excited and Fish and Game is kind of excited to have it, even though they're not associated with this project. They're excited to see it actually come to fruition somewhere in the state. So I think that's it for the general overview, but I can go into any level of detail you want on any of the specifics.
I just had one question on the, you keep mentioning impervious structure road, but isn't it the current road dirt?
Yeah, gravel is equally considered impervious, just like pavement, from a drainage design standpoint. We have to look at them exactly the same.
Oh.
It's gravel and it's grindings. There's some grindings down there that we've tried to keep going. I'm pretty excited about gating that off. People put things there that should end up going to landfill, and shingles, and refrigerators, and televisions, and keeping it pedestrian only and having a direct line of sight where the authorities can look down. I think it's a very smart way to go to help improve it down there.
It's great.
I'm sorry.
Commissioner Pappas?
I'm sorry, I just spoke out. Any idea how long the permitting's gonna take?
So the alteration of terrain permit and the dredge and fill permit take the longest. If you get any requests for information, it just pushes the time. But typically we'd be looking to do that over a season, so like say for the winter time frame. We have a lot of meetings to go through in the city process before unless we're told, move full steam ahead. But of course, just like your previous consultant, it doesn't make sense to do that because it's just a very limited budget. So I think what's going to happen is we're going to end up going through the winter, the portion of the winter anyway, trying to get all of the approvals to sign up. There is an engineered plan that shows all the grading and contours, the typical sections. It was handed out tonight as well to you, so you can see a far more greater level of detail. But I think we're going to end up spending the next couple of months getting these approvals moved ahead, and then it's going to take another 2 months or 3 to go through the permitting process.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Alderman Jennings.
So if you could, Diane, if you could show us the slide, one of the previous slides that showed that one's fun, that one's great. So where exactly is Hills Ferry Road and the railroad and the crossing?
The railroad is kind of this brown area that was colored through here.
Okay. And that's Hills Ferry
The
Road?
crossing is right here. This is the little sort of, not roundabout, but you know the area right there where you can kind of loop around that tree.
Okay.
And then it's the Beezer property to the right of it.
Okay. So is there a reason, I suppose it's really not important, but I'm wondering why that fishhook type road evolved, and is there Are we limited to where the boat ramp is now, as opposed to sticking to the north side of the property and coming more directly to the water?
Sort of here.
Something like,
Yeah.
something closer there.
Yeah, there's multiple reasons for that. Actually, one is that there's a substantial area here that's already disturbed. We're using all of it. It's all within the footprint of what we're doing, beyond, and then more, of course. But so from the shoreland permit standpoint, there's a metric. Shoreland permit goes from the top of the bank to 250 feet into the site. And the first 50 feet has to do with the trees you can and can't cut. The next 100 feet, there's 150 from there, I think it's 100, controls, so what you're measuring in there is the amount of unaltered area you're leaving versus that you're eliminating. And so imagine in that area, a lot of what we're doing on the site is already altered. And if we were to sort of put it over here, we'd be completely displacing entirely unaltered area. So that's one reason. The other reason from a permitting standpoint is it would be impossible, in my experience, to convince New Hampshire DES that the least impacting alternative is to cut a brand new spot through the shoreline, which now you're into the first 50 feet, which they consider to be the most sacred 50 feet in that 250. And cutting through there would be an issue. There's also been field evaluations. Field evaluations, actually, the city spent some time going through. They did walk through here, they walked through there. They looked at actual trees, actual depressions that could not be wetlands, and they actually sort of flagged, hey, this looks like a good spot for a road because we don't have any physical features there on the ground. And that dovetails nicely with the existing site and leading into it. So the topography all along here includes a pretty substantial depression all along here behind the shore bank, which is a great spot. It's already collecting water coming out of here, this development. It's already water being discharged into there. And so we certainly don't want to, if we can avoid it, cut through that. And we're counting on, calculating the capacity of it and using that as a means by which we might eliminate that pipe altogether. So it's the least impacting alternative for all of the permitting reasons, and as well as a sort of field tested review of the site. It's the best spot, we think.
Thank you.
Just a quick question for myself. If everything goes smoothly with permitting and all the city approvals, when do you anticipate this being able to be implemented for the benefit of the residents?
So I think from a timeline standpoint, we would be looking at like a late summer construction of next year would be a possibility. You probably don't have the same kind of restrictions that the state Fish and Game would have, where they don't want to close the site till October 15th and do a major construction project. You're not, held to that same standard, so you may say, we're going to start as soon as we physically can. It's more difficult. We always look at fall construction. But in your case, I think we'll be ready in the season before that, somewhere in the summer.
No, thank you. And Superintendent, this is going to be a free access to the residents? Is that what the plan is?
Yes, it currently is. It'll be kept open. And again, I want to put a gate here and a gate here so that pedestrian-wise you can go through here, but it's going to eliminate people driving through here, and it's going to make a big impact on the overall quality of the area. People in the neighborhood were very supportive of that. So I think that's going to help a lot.
Excellent. Any other questions, Alderman Jenny?
Are you allowed to go into the river at all and remove any obstructions?
So, well, the ramp itself is 12 feet wide, the projection of it, plus 2 more feet to either side. Excuse me, 12 feet wide. It's 2 more feet on either side, plus the stone slope that builds the ramp foundation. that entire footprint also goes out into the water. You can see it better on that plan, because on those plans, you see this, the actual shore in the water line is gonna be somewhere around here. So roughly half of the ramp is happening underwater. So everything within that footprint at the very least, if there's any obstructions to it, those get removed. But unless we're aware of something immediately to one side or the other that we want to eliminate, we don't typically, we don't typically expand it because it's permittable. It's permitted area that we need to add to the site. We wanna start taking out. But let's say we've had projects that have had rocks, big ones, that were known to people, and made an effort to permit their removal, so we had a safe course direction. Other options are, safety buoys as well, to give the safe path to the ramp from the bottom line.
Thank you.
Is that something you're aware of? If you're aware of some obstruction under the water that maybe we haven't seen yet, or?
Anecdotally, in the 80s sometime, I backed a boat trailer down that ramp, and my rear axle got hung up on a rock, and I had to get towed. So.
And so, in that case, we're right in the footprint of that 12 plus 2 plus 2 plus, a couple of extra, all the way out there, and that's going to be clear and become just smooth concrete planks with no gaps in between. Especially designed to last as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on to item B under Parks and Rec, informational update. Nick, on the summer camp?
I provided the annual summer camp summary. We had a very productive camp schedule, and our gross, we had a gross profit somewhere above $30,000. So it was a good year for us. Unless you have questions, we can.
I do.
I think that's net profit you're referring to.
Correct.
Okay, fair enough, and go ahead.
Just as a suggestion, I was thinking, have we thought about starting a wrestling clinic in the summer?
We have. I believe you, our program coordinator, Jeff, came to us with that suggestion in one of our staff meetings, so.
Super.
That's something we could look at for sure.
Great.
Excellent. We'll put that on file. And item C, do I have a motion?
I'll move to approve an additional drum and bugle corps event at Stella Stadium in 2019 as part of the summer fun program.
Very good. Discussion. Superintendent, you want to just give us a brief update?
Typically, we allow one performance a year there. There's been one other year that we've allowed two, and with this regional event, this opportunity, I think it's a really good quality event. It's good for the kids, and it's only going to come around once in a while, so I think adding an extra date next year as part of our Summer Fun anniversary. We're doing the fine homework, but we think it's the 40th year of Summer Fun. So.
Excellent. Yes, Commissioner Peppers.
So you didn't get a lot of concerns from people?
Not yet.
Okay,
There'll
good.
still be some more permissions to go
Okay.
through.
But even when you've had them in the past, you haven't?
No.
Good, okay, good.
No. We've made some improvements over there. I don't know if any of you have been over, but there's 2 new scoreboards.
Mhm.
We kind of gave them miniature Holman scoreboards, and we put in a new sound system, which is directional.
Okay.
So I believe
Good.
that there's already been improvements over there from that as
Excellent.
well.
Commissioner
Yes.
Morganti.
Superintendent, so is there a fee that's charged to the drum and bugle corps?
We can't. Usually, if it's a summer fun event, we would not charge them a fee.
I was just saying, because in their paperwork, they said that the school department is charging them to use the schools during that
Right.
event.
Correct.
And I thought it was surprising that we're not charging them to use the facility.
We don't. Not saying we can't, but it hasn't been discussed yet.
Thank you.
If no other questions, how did the commissioners vote to approve? Say aye.
Yes, aye.
Aye. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, moving right along to engineering. Mr. Crane, feel free to join us. I think we're on item B.
Move to approve residential commercial wastewater permit service, permit and fees as submitted.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we are now on item C.
Move to approve change order number 3 to the paving contract for the fiscal year 18 paving program to Newport Construction of Nashua, New Hampshire, the amount of $209,180. Funding through Department 160 Admin Engineering Fund Bond Activity Paving.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Item D.
Move to approve change order number 1 for the paving contract for the 2018 federal paving program to Newport Construction Corp. of Nashua, New Hampshire in the amount of $611,545.18. Funding will be through Department 160 Admin Engineering Grant and Bond Activity, New Hampshire DOT Nashua Roadway Improvement and Paving.
Any discussion? Mr. Crane, Commissioner Ackerman has a quick question for you. How are we doing on paving for this fall, sir?
Okay, so we have two programs,
Yep.
right? So the 2018 $7 million or so program, we almost wrapped up with that. We completed almost 23 miles of paving. Our goal was to do just under 25, but streets had to be deferred for one reason or the other. And the other program, the federal program, we are working on Somerset Parkway as well as Amherst Street. There's paving scheduled tomorrow for Somerset Parkway, Amherst Street. And our goal on Kinsley Street is to get some paving done by the second or third week in November.
Excellent. Alderman Jettie.
So I notice it's, this includes an extension of time to complete the project. When do you think Kinsley Street will be completed?
Right, so in a couple of weeks in November, we'll be doing some paving. We'll be putting down the base paving, and then we'll do the final paving next year. But at least we'll have a smooth surface to ride on Kinsley. Now, that's only a portion of Kinsley. Within the contract, it's from Main Street to Hanover, which is about a little bit more than half of the length of Kinsley.
Right. So from Hanover
To Main.
back to going the other way, it's pretty rough right now.
So that'll be next year. So on my drive to here tonight, I noticed the trench patching done by the gas company isn't smooth, and I was wondering why it's so rough. And we're gonna have to talk to them. They might have to do some shimming of that trench. It's, I think it's not acceptable. But it will get its work on it will be done next year to complete the entire street.
Okay, and is there a possibility that the roughness that you confirm exists today? You think anything can be done about that before the winter?
Yeah, I think they will have to shim it to make it smoother. I don't think we can live with that finish.
Good.
Okay. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Item D, was it D? E.
No, we're at E.
Move to approve change order number 1 for the construction contract for the 2018 sewer replacement Kinsley Street project to Newport Construction of Nashua, New Hampshire, in an amount not to exceed $27,000. Funding is through Department 169 Wastewater Fund Activity Sewer Rehab.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Item F?
I'll move to approve a hardship request to excavate for installation of flashing beacon at the new crosswalk for the Bridge Street, for new Bridge Street leading to Mines Falls Park near Ledge Street and Everett Street.
Any discussion? Commissioner Moriarty.
Yeah, well, after reviewing this, I did not find this met the criteria for a hardship or an emergency. So why it went through, I'm not sure. So I want to put that on record.
Okay.
It's too late, it's after the fact, it's already done. It should have come to us prior to it being done for approval, and it didn't. So that was community development, should have brought it to us. Is my opinion, maybe the engineer has another.
Nope,
I
that's
don't-
fine. Mr. DeCrane, do you have any
and-
commentary, or?
I think that's true. The project is being led by community development. We are engaged, in somewhat of a, not, primary, at a primary level. It's, plans are sent to us, and sometimes the plans already, they're moving forward. I think they should have known, community development, the director and the engineer who's been hired should have known that's a new street, and they should have come to the board for the waiver. I think there are some projects that they're leading, and they, they don't have the experience, the project management experience or the engineering experience to run these projects. That's my personal opinion. They're good at planning and showing us what needs to be done, but when you take it to actual final design and construction, they should pass it on to the public works that has that kind of experience. I mean, you saw tonight, you saw the intersection improvement. That's being run by, again, somebody who doesn't have that kind of background.
So we did not approve this evening. What would be the consequences? Anything?
It was just to send a message, there's nothing, it's already done, but we could vote against it, the motion.
Okay. All right. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. DeCrane. Solid waste. All right, we have a motion.
I'll move to approve rate increase for commercial recycling received at the landfill from $50 per ton to $100 per ton. And if we might just quickly.
Certainly, we'll invite the superintendent right to the table.
Right, 'cause-
We have a motion to increase the rate. I'm sure there's some discussion. We'll invite our superintendent to the floor. Any background information you might want to provide or could provide?
We actually, Superintendent Jeff LaFleur, we actually just realized a couple of weeks ago that we were actually charging commercial customers $50 a ton when we're actually paying out $80, $90, or $100 a ton to ship it out. So we'll just push these costs off to the commercial customers.
Okay. Go ahead, Commissioner Peppers.
If we can keep our eye and pulse on that, because I know it's hard to think of a lot of things, but that's a huge.
Absolutely.
This is, I think this will really help the money go farther.
Yep.
Thank you.
So, could I ask a question? Do you,
Alderman Jettie?
This commercial recycling, what is this? Where does it come from?
It's our commercial haulers that haul from grocery stores, regular stores, restaurants, whoever's doing recycling and they want to bring it here.
Okay. So I do have a follow-on question. How often does the rate increase to the city of Nashville? Is it annually?
For the recycling, do we ship out?
Yes, sir.
We do that monthly. It follows an ACR, an account or an amount that the states follow.
Okay. So could I make a recommendation to the board and to the superintendent that perhaps we put this on the agenda to look at on a quarterly basis? Or would that be too often?
I mean, the board could approve rate changes anytime they want. I mean, I'm going with $100 and, the markets are starting to come back down again. We're at $70 a ton to ship out, so I mean, I haven't changed rates for any of my other accounts coming in. I mean, we could change the trash rates, you could raise the C&D rates, you could do whatever we wanted. I mean, it's just a matter of when.
Perhaps, okay, thank you. Perhaps a recommendation to the director could be to revisit this maybe in another 6 months, simply to keep our eye on the ball versus getting caught flat-footed like we were before. That's all.
I don't think quarterly is a terrible idea.
I don't either, but, all right. Would we, like to amend the motion in any way? To revisit this on a?
So I guess, to report back to the board on a quarterly basis
Fair enough.
as to what the rates are.
To approve the rate increase for the commercial recycling received at the landfill from $50 a ton to $100 a ton.
And then to revisit it
and revisit this on a quarterly basis. Any other discussion? Alderman Jettie?
So, I'm just wondering, has any thought been given, I don't know that this would happen or not, but is there any, these commercial, so I'm thinking of like a grocery store, sending their recyclable stuff to us to be recycled. Is there any chance that instead of sending it for recycling, they would just put it in the trash?
There's always that chance, but hopefully people are doing the right thing.
And our trash rate is what?
$80 a ton.
$80. So,
You're getting into the same situation that we are as a board, that why are we paying $100 a ton to ship it when we could landfill it for $80 a ton?
yeah, well.
We're looking at the same situation as a board.
Right, but we have control over doing what's right, as opposed to these commercial customers who may just be looking at the bottom line, may not be looking at anything beyond that. Would it, I'm just wondering whether it would,
That's why I'm coming to the board to make a decision. They can leave it at $50 a ton, or we can raise it to the 100 and.
or
hope
make
that-
it the
Or
same, make it
make
the
it
same as the
continue.
trash.
Yeah. Or that's a good option. If you make it the same as trash, then they wouldn't throw it into the trash. You look into the future because you're thinking it's gonna, the rates have been going up. And you're trying to just protect.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the markets have been so unstable that if we visit this quarterly, if we're finding, you know what I mean, if we're finding that, we can make the adjustment.
All right.
And
Any other discussion? All those in favor as the motion as amended, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, sir. Wastewater, Superintendent, would you like to join us? All right. Do I have a motion on item A?
I'll move to approve the user warrants as presented.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion B?
I'll move to approve the contract with T-Buck Construction of Turner, Maine in the amount of $831,164 for the construction of the new water booster station at the wastewater treatment facility, funding is through Department 169 wastewater fund work, surf loan activity, wastewater booster station.
Okay. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Item C?
Move to approve a contract with Woodward and Curran of North Andover, Mass. In the amount not to exceed $93,000 for the construction administration services for the water pump upgrade project. Funding is through Department 169 wastewater fund work, surf loan activity, waste water booster station.
Any discussion? We have to have the superintendent speak at least. Go ahead.
David Boucher, wastewater superintendent. Thank you for having me.
There you go. Anything that we should need to know, or should we move the question?
No, it's pretty straightforward.
All right, fair enough. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Commissioners' comments? Commissioner Moriarty?
For the superintendent.
Yes.
I noticed that we will be having a big expense coming through on the energy recovery generator upgrades.
Correct.
Could you just give a synopsis on that? What is that? I mean, it's like, gonna cost like $2 million, right?
Yes, the energy recovery upgrade, it is We have a energy recovery building at the wastewater treatment facility, and it contains a generator that generates power to supply power to our digester complex. It can also supply power back to the grid, also saving us money. So it supplies power for heat for the complex, and 2 locations, also part of our wet weather facility, and heats the sludge of the digester. The upgrade contains, the generator that's there hasn't run in a long time, so it's being replaced by 2 new generators, kind of a redundancy, because we need to constantly provide heat to the digester to produce sludge and dry it so we can get rid of it. And it also requires some construction of the modifications to the existing building to fit these 2 generators. It also requires some modifications outside the building, because the generators run off of biogas that's generated from the digester complex, the egg, the giant egg, and it has to be blended with natural gas also. So it's pretty complex because of the mixing of the 2 gases, but it is an energy recovery, so we can sell some back to the Eversource and grid to recoup some money. So it's a big benefit, but it is a big cost.
Very good.
Thank you.
Anything else for the superintendent? Thank you, sir. Did you want to know?
I think I'm usually in there, aren't I? Before commissioners' comments.
By all means, go right ahead.
Andy Patrician, Assistant Director. There's no director's report this month. The director can double up for you next month, but I do have some announcements that I want to go over, just to make everybody aware of. The Four Hills landfill will be closed on November 12th in observance of Veterans Day. Curbside pickup will be delayed by 1 day that week.
It'll be on schedule. We only close on the holiday.
Curbside pickup will be delayed by 1 day that week.
We always.
Who sent that to you?
Lauren? Okay.
Will we be on our normal?
Superintendent, could you speak to that, please?
Oh, I think people are gonna get really confused.
Superintendent Jeff LaFleur, Solid Waste Department. We have this issue every year, so we've decided to go with, if it's the actual holiday, we will delay trash. If it's not the actual holiday and an observed holiday, we will be picking trash that day. So the actual holiday is on Sunday, Veterans Day, the 11th.
That's fine.
Monday's the 12th is our observed holiday for employees. We're gonna work a normal schedule that week. So if the 4th of July falls on a Tuesday, we delay on Tuesday.
Okay.
If it falls on a Saturday, though, we'd pick trash up.
Yeah,
On the Friday.
it does get.
So
it
if
does
it's the
get
actual
sticky.
holiday, we won't pick trash. Observed holidays, we will pick trash.
Yeah, but do a lot of people have that Monday off, but so be it.
Yeah, the landfill will be closed.
All right, so to be clear, the landfill is closed on Monday, November 12th.
Yes, but collections
But
will happen.
collections will continue to happen.
Yes,
All right.
thank you.
I was only reading what I was
No,
giving.
you're fine.
Oh,
Thank
boy.
you for the
All right,
clarification.
let's try the next one. Jeff, don't leave yet. This has to do with you, too. The final household hazardous waste collection of 2018 will be November 3rd.
Yes.
All right, we got one right. Also, the next drug take-back day will be held at the Nashua DPW Garage at 9 Stadium Drive on Saturday, October 27th, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., and will be run by the Nashua Police Department.
And you said that's at the,
Street Department at the Garage,
Department.
9 Stadium Drive. And the last one is the November BPW will be at wastewater. There will be a 4 p.m. tour before the meeting, and the BOA will be, Board of Aldermen will be invited to this tour as well, so.
And the date for that is? The 19th?
The 19th, I think we figured out on Monday, yep.
Okay.
And that's all I have under administration, thank you.
Okay. Moving right along. Commissioners' comments. Alderman Jettie? Anything? add?
No, I.
Very good. I didn't wanna
Given
leave-
the hour, it's.
I didn't want to leave yet.
Yeah.
Very good.
Thank you.
Non-public session.
Okay,
Yeah, so-
we're gonna move to personnel.
Well,
Oh, go ahead, sorry. I apologize.
You can have a non-public?
Yeah, we're gonna, yeah.
Okay. The director wanted me to add some more information, so I was not going to stay at the end after. So can I do it now?
Absolutely.
So,
Mr. Ducrain.
About that fence on Hutchinson, I want to make sure you have all information. You've tabled it and you're going to look at it. A couple of things. We do have an email from the neighbor saying the drive is unsafe, so we have that in written in form. If you go out there, you will see a jog in fence, and you have to wonder why Gate City Fence will do that. The fence along Huey, it runs further in, and then it jogs out, and you have the stockade that's only 5 feet from the edge of the road. So you have to wonder why. Mr. Fish did mention, he spoke with me, and he talked about wanting a space to put his boat and all of that. You'd also see a gate on Huey, and apparently he has intention for, to access from Huey on to the area. We have, the city has requirements on driveways. If you're in a corner lot, you can't have a total of more than 24 feet. Right now, he has an 18-foot driveway on Hutchinson, which means that he's going to be allowed, he can apply for it, a 6-foot driveway on Huey. He can go to the zoning board to get a wider driveway if he wants to. I also wanted to let you know that in the past few years, we've been pretty successful in getting new fences that are put in the wrong location within the right-of-way relocated. Ones that come to our attention, ones that we pick up along the way. We have to make sure if we allow this, we will have to give it that, privilege to other people as well. In fact, the same fence company had, and I mentioned that in my write-up, had installed a fence that caused a real problem with side distance at an intersection, and the owner and the fence company worked it and they moved the fence back. And that was just recent. So all these things you need to consider. As you look at
Yeah,
this.
a lot of my concern is to make sure that what we do for one, if you make one person move a fence, do the same for, because I've seen other that are clearly in the right of way. We're supposed to, again, I thought that was more code enforcement, not aspect.
Other than that, Commissioner Ackerman, you asked a question tonight about this intersection. I don't think you got the right answer. So the alternative that is being preferred, alternative 3, you asked about traffic on East Holland Street. You asked about that. And if you look at this chart, right, it's the second line under the traffic, East Holland Street to Hudson, under traffic volumes. Right, so today, or do nothing, it's a B level of service. And the alternative 3 is an F, so it's failed. So I don't know if they understood your question, but at least you should know that that's part of this improvement, proposed improvement. Okay.
It was very informative when I went to the public meeting that nothing here significantly improves the time from leaving Main Street to get over to Hudson. None of this gives it any considerable improvement. It's still, and I've done it at rush hour, 5 o'clock hour, 4:30 hour. It can be a 45-minute drive for 3 miles. Very, very unsettling.
Okay, that's all I wanted to mention.
All right.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay, we're all set through commissioners' comments, we're on to personnel. Is there a motion?
Please go into non-public.
Hold on.
We have First, we have a public motion to unseal the non-public minutes for the personnel from the Board of Public Works meeting of September 20th, 2018.
Any discussion on unsealing those minutes? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Item B.
I move by roll call that the board go into non-public session pursuant to RSA 91-A3, Roman numeral 2D, the hiring of any person as a public employee.
Would you like to take the roll?
Commissioner Ackerman?
Yes.
Commissioner Pappas?
Yes.
Commissioner Moriarty?
Yes.
And Mayor Donches and Commissioner Tease are absent.
Motion passes. We're in.
At 8:20.
At 8:20 PM.
Okay, you're rolling.
Thank you. I move by roll call to seal the minutes of the Board of Public Works non-public meeting of October 25th, 2018, until such time as the majority of the board votes that the purpose of the confidentiality would no longer be served.
Very good. Thank you.
Commissioner Ackerman?
Yes.
Commissioner Pappas?
Yes.
Commissioner Moriarty?
Yes.
And Mayor Donches and Commissioner Tease are absent.
Very good. Do we have a motion
I'll
to
move to
adjourn?
adjourn.
So moved. Thank you, sir.